The scar ran from his temple to his jaw, a jagged line that made children scatter and women avert their eyes. But it wasn't the scar that terrified Ivy Caldwell as she stood before Rowan Hale on their wedding day. It was the silence. The way he looked at her like she was a stranger he'd made a terrible mistake inviting into his life. The preacher's words blurred together, and when Rowan's calloused hand closed around hers, ice cold despite the summer heat, one thought screamed through her mind. What have I done? If you want to see how Ivy survives this dangerous bargain on the frontier, stay with me until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The stagecoach lurched to a stop, sending a cloud of Colorado dust through the open window. Ivy Caldwell pressed her handkerchief to her mouth, coughing as grit settled on her traveling dress, the only decent thing she still owned. Through the haze, she caught her first glimpse of Cripple Creek, a scatter of weather-beaten buildings clinging to the mountainside like survivors of a shipwreck. This was madness, complete madness. 3 weeks ago, she'd been living in Philadelphia, working as a seamstress in her aunt's shop, drowning in debts her late father had left behind. Then came the letter, a response to an advertisement she'd answered in a moment of desperation so profound it felt like drowning. Seeking wife. Frontier landowner. No romantic expectations. Partnership arrangement. Travel expenses provided. The words had been sparse, businesslike. She'd written back the same day. Now, as the driver hauled her trunk down from the coach, the reality of what she'd done settled over her like a burial shroud. She'd agreed to marry a complete stranger, to leave everything familiar behind, to tie her entire future to a man whose only correspondence had been 3 brief letters, each more impersonal than the last. Miss Caldwell? Ivy turned. A thin man in a dusty suit stood before her, his face weathered by sun and wind. He removed his hat, revealing hair gone gray before its time. I'm Samuel Pritchard. Mr. Hale sent me to collect you. His eyes held something that might have been pity. The ceremony's arranged for this afternoon, if you're still willing. If you're still willing. The words hung in the air like an escape route. She could turn around right now, use the last of her money to book passage back east, return to Philadelphia and face the debt collectors, the shame, the slow suffocation of a life with no options. I'm willing, Ivy heard herself say. The ride to Rowan Hale's property took them out of town, up a winding trail that climbed into territory so wild and untamed it seemed to resist human presence. Pine forests gave way to rocky outcroppings. A hawk circled overhead, its cry sharp and lonely. Samuel Pritchard said little during the journey, but what he did say made Ivy's stomach clench. Mr. Hale's a private man, he offered, guiding the wagon around a particularly vicious rut. Keeps to himself mostly, does right by his workers, pays fair, but he doesn't socialize. Some folks find that... He paused, searching for words. Unsettling. Why did he need to advertise for a wife? Ivy asked. Surely there are women in town who... None who'll have him. Samuel's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. The words hit like a physical blow. I see. I don't mean to frighten you, miss. Mr. Hale's not a bad man. He's just... Well, you'll see soon enough. They crested a ridge and the homestead came into view. Ivy had expected something crude, a rough cabin, maybe a barn. What she saw stole the breath from her lungs. The main house was a sprawling structure of timber and stone, 2 stories high with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Outbuildings dotted the property, a massive barn, a stable, what looked like workers' quarters. Corrals held dozens of horses. Fields stretched toward the tree line, golden with late summer grain. This wasn't a struggling frontier holding. This was an empire. Mr. Hale owns most of the valley, Samuel said, following her gaze. Timber rights, grazing land, water access. He's probably the wealthiest man in 3 counties. Then why? Ivy stopped herself, but Samuel understood. Why would he need to send east for a bride? The old man shrugged. That's between you and him, I reckon. They pulled up to the main house. Before Samuel could help her down, the front door opened. Rowan Hale stepped onto the porch, and Ivy's world tilted. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that strained the seams of his work shirt. Dark hair, slightly too long, brushed his collar. But it was his face that locked her in place. The left side was unmarred, almost handsome despite the hard set of his jaw. The right side bore a scar that ran from temple to jawline, a raised, twisted line of tissue that pulled at his eye and mouth, giving his features a permanent asymmetry. He descended the porch steps with careful, measured movements, as if trying not to startle a wild animal. "Miss Caldwell." His voice was deep, rough-edged. "You came." It wasn't a greeting. It was a statement of fact, tinged with something that might have been surprise. "I gave my word, Mr. Hale." His eyes, one dark brown, one slightly clouded from the scar tissue, studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She forced herself to meet his gaze, to not look away from the ruined side of his face. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite approval, but close. "The preacher's waiting inside," he said. "If you need time to prepare yourself, I'm ready." A lie. She wasn't ready. She'd never be ready for this. But standing here under his scrutinizing gaze, she understood with sudden clarity that hesitation would be seen as weakness. Whatever this arrangement was, it required strength. The interior of the house was surprisingly refined. Polished wood floors, substantial furniture, even curtains at the windows, clearly a woman's touch from some previous occupant. The front room had been arranged for a ceremony. The preacher, a round man with kind eyes, stood near the fireplace. Samuel took his place as witness. No guests, no celebration, just 4 people in a silent house, about to bind 2 strangers together for life. Rowan stood beside her, close enough that she could smell leather and pine and something else. Wood smoke, maybe, or the sharp tang of the mountains themselves. His presence was overwhelming, not just his size, but the weight of his silence, the carefully controlled way he held himself. The preacher began to speak, but Ivy barely heard the words. Her entire awareness had narrowed to the man beside her, to the question hammering through her mind. Who is he? What happened to him? What am I walking into? "Do you, Rowan Hale, take this woman?" "I do." His voice was steady, emotionless. "And do you, Ivy Caldwell?" "I do." Her own voice sounded small in the large room. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The preacher looked expectantly at Rowan, clearly waiting for the traditional kiss. Rowan ignored him entirely, instead turning to Samuel. "Thank you for bringing her. I'll settle accounts with you tomorrow." It was a dismissal. Samuel touched his hat to Ivy, offered a nod to Rowan, and left. The preacher followed moments later, pocketing his fee and making a hasty exit. Then they were alone. Ivy stood in the middle of the front room, her traveling bag still in her hand, married to a man she'd met less than an hour ago. The silence stretched between them like a physical thing. Rowan moved first, walking to a side table where a bottle and glasses waited. He poured 2 measures of whiskey, brought one to her. "You should sit." He gestured to the sofa. "It's been a long journey." Ivy took the glass but remained standing. "I'd prefer to know the expectations of this arrangement." A muscle jumped in his jaw, the unscarred side. "Direct. I appreciate that." "Your letters were clear about the terms. Partnership, not romance. But I need to understand what that means in practice." He took a drink, his eyes never leaving her face. "This house has been empty too long. I need someone to manage it. Meals, cleaning, basic household operations. I'm away on business frequently. You'd have independence, your own space." "Separate bedrooms?" It wasn't a question. "Yes." No hesitation. "I'm not looking for a conventional marriage, Miss Caldwell. I'm looking for competent company and household management." "It's Mrs. Hale now," she said quietly. Something flickered across his ruined face. Surprise again, and perhaps a shadow of pain. "So it is." "And what about town? Church socials, community gatherings? Am I expected to attend those as your wife?" His expression hardened. "I don't attend those things. Neither will you, unless you choose otherwise. But you should understand, the townspeople will talk. About you, about us. They'll make assumptions, spread rumors. If you can't handle that, I can handle talk, Mr. Hale. I've had practice." He set down his glass, the movement careful and controlled. "Why did you answer my advertisement, Mrs. Hale? A woman like you, educated, refined, could have found easier options." "A woman like me," Ivy repeated, tasting bitterness. Had debts I couldn't pay and prospects I couldn't stomach. Your offer provided an escape. I took it. Honest. He almost smiled. Almost. That's good. I value honesty above almost everything else. Then perhaps you'll be honest with me. Why did you advertise for a wife instead of courting locally? The shutters came down over his face, fast and absolute. That's my concern. We're married now. Your concerns are mine. No. The word was flat, final. Some things remain private. That's one of them. Ivy felt her temper spike. 3 weeks of anxiety, hours of travel, a wedding to a stranger, and now this wall of silence. You expect me to manage your household, to present myself as your wife, but I'm not entitled to know why you needed to import a bride from 2,000 miles away? That's correct. The sheer audacity of it stunned her into momentary silence. Then she did something she hadn't planned. She laughed. It came out sharp and slightly unhinged, the sound of a woman who'd reached the edge of absurdity and decided to jump. Rowan stared at her like she'd sprouted a second head. I'm sorry, Ivy managed, setting down her whiskey before she spilled it. It's just, I've made a bargain with a scarred stranger who owns half a mountain, married him in a 10-minute ceremony, and now he's telling me I don't get to ask questions. It's either laugh or scream, mister. Haley, and I doubt screaming would improve the situation. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, incredibly, his mouth twitched. Barely, almost imperceptibly, but it was there. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. She met his eyes squarely. Your letters led me to believe you were a simple landowner. This, she gestured at the house around them, is not simple. Would it have mattered if I told you the full extent of the property? She considered that. No, I still would have come. But I don't like deception, even by omission. Noted. He picked up her traveling bag. I'll show you to your room. Dinner's at 6. Mrs. Chen prepares the meals. She's been keeping house in your absence. She'll stay on as cook if that's acceptable. Of course. Ivy followed him up the stairs, acutely aware of his size, the way his boots struck the wooden steps with solid purpose. He moved like a man accustomed to being alone, to taking up space without apology. Her room was at the end of the hall, spacious and well-appointed. A large bed with a quilted coverlet, a wardrobe, a writing desk positioned near the window. The view looked out over the valley, miles of wilderness stretching toward distant peaks. The master bedroom is across the hall, Rowan said from the doorway. If you need anything, there's a bell pull by the fireplace downstairs. Mrs. Chen will hear it. He set her bag down and turned to leave. Mr. Hale, he paused. Thank you. For the room. It's lovely. He gave a slight nod, barely an acknowledgement, and left, pulling the door closed behind him. Ivy sank onto the bed, her legs suddenly unsteady. She was married. To a stranger. In a house that felt more like a museum than a home, surrounded by wilderness in a territory she barely understood. What had she done? But even as the question formed, she knew the answer. She'd chosen survival. She'd traded uncertainty for structure, poverty for security, even if that security came wrapped in mystery and sealed with silence. The real question was, could she live with it? Dinner was an exercise in uncomfortable formality. Mrs. Chen, a compact Chinese woman with gray-streaked hair and shrewd eyes, served roasted chicken, potatoes, and vegetables with efficient precision. She nodded to Ivy, said nothing, and disappeared back into the kitchen. Rowan sat at the head of the table. Ivy had taken a seat halfway down its length, uncertain of the protocol. He'd raised an eyebrow at the distance, but said nothing. They ate in silence. Ivy was acutely conscious of every sound, the scrape of her fork against the plate, the rustle of her dress when she shifted position, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Finally, she couldn't bear it anymore. How long have you lived here, Mr. Hale? 7 years? He didn't look up from his plate. And before that? Elsewhere. It was like trying to draw water from a stone. Ivy set down her fork, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. After a moment, Rowan glanced up. What? I'm waiting for you to decide whether we're going to have a conversation or simply occupy the same space in silence for the rest of our lives. His jaw tightened. I told you I'm not a social man. There's a difference between being unsocial and being deliberately obtuse. She kept her voice level, reasonable. I'm not asking for your life story, Mr. Hale. I'm asking for basic courtesy. I bought this land 7 years ago, he said after a pause. Built the house, established the timber operation, acquired additional property as it became available. I employ 40 men during peak season. The operation is profitable. That's all you need to know. What about family, friends? None. None at all? None that matter. The bleakness in his voice struck her silent. She studied him across the length of the table, this large, scarred man who'd built an empire in the wilderness and then advertised for a wife like one might advertise for a housekeeper. Why me? She asked quietly. Of all the responses you must have received, why choose mine? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, you didn't ask about the scar. Ivy blinked. What? In your letters, you asked about the property, the climate, the living conditions. You never once asked about my appearance or what happened to me. He lifted his hand, traced the air along the line of his scar without touching it. Every other woman wanted to know the story, wanted reassurance that I wasn't violent, wasn't dangerous. You never asked. I assumed you'd tell me if it was relevant. It's not. The finality in his voice was absolute, but Ivy was beginning to understand. The scar wasn't just a physical mark. It was a barrier, a wall he'd built between himself and the world. People looked at it and saw violence, danger, something to fear. He'd internalized that fear, made it part of his armor. The townspeople, she said carefully, they're afraid of you. Yes. Why? Because fear is easier than understanding. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I have work to finish. Good night, Mrs. Hale. He was gone before she could respond. Ivy's first week at the homestead passed in a blur of adjustment and observation. Mrs. Chen, once she understood that Ivy wasn't going to interfere with her kitchen, warmed slightly. She spoke English haltingly, but managed to communicate the household routines with remarkable efficiency. The house was cleaned every other day. Laundry was done on Mondays. Supplies were delivered from town each Friday. Rowan kept to himself. He left early each morning, riding out to inspect his timber operations or meet with his foreman. He returned at dusk, ate dinner in near silence, and retreated to his study. Sometimes Ivy heard him moving around late at night, footsteps in the hall, the creak of floorboards. She began to explore the house in his absence, hungry for information he wouldn't provide. The study was locked. His bedroom door was always closed. But the library, a small room off the main hallway, held clues. Books on forestry and land management filled the shelves. Also, poetry, philosophy. A worn copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Engineering texts. Botanical surveys. The collection of a man who educated himself, who sought knowledge with methodical determination. On the mantelpiece, a single photograph in a silver frame. Ivy lifted it carefully. 5 men standing in front of a timber mill, tools in hand. They were younger, laughing at something off camera. She scanned their faces, looking for Rowan. There, second from the left. No scar. His face whole and unmarred, almost handsome with its clean lines and direct gaze. He had his arm around the shoulders of the man next to him, a gesture of easy camaraderie that seemed impossible now. What had happened? What had transformed that laughing young man into the silent, guarded stranger she'd married? You're curious. Ivy spun around, nearly dropping the photograph. Rowan stood in the doorway, still wearing his work clothes, dust on his boots. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean to intrude. It's your house now, too. He stepped into the room, took the photograph from her hands, looked at it for a long moment. That was 12 years ago. Different life. You look happy. I was young. He set the frame back on the mantelpiece with careful precision. Youth allows for stupidity. What happened to them? The other men? His face closed down. 2 moved on to other work. 1 died in a logging accident. 1... He stopped. It doesn't matter. But it clearly did. The tension in his shoulders, the way his hand had tightened on the frame before he set it down, whatever had happened to that 4th man, it mattered deeply. Mr. Hale, I'd prefer if you called me Rowan. The words came out stiff, formal. We're married. The formality seems excessive. Then you should call me Ivy. He nodded once, a sharp jerk of his head. I'm going to clean up before dinner. Mrs. Chen said you wanted to discuss household accounts. The change of subject was deliberate, absolute. Ivy recognized the wall coming down, the shutters closing. Yes, if you'll show me the books, I can take over management of household expenses. Study, after dinner. He left before she could respond. Ivy stood alone in the library, surrounded by books that belonged to a stranger, holding more questions than answers. The household accounts revealed what Ivy had already suspected. Rowan Hale was wealthy. Not merely comfortable, but genuinely, substantially wealthy. Timber contracts, land leases, investment income from holdings she couldn't even identify. The numbers made her head spin. You don't need a wife, she said, scanning the ledgers spread across his study desk. You need an accountant. Rowan sat in the corner, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching her work. I have an accountant in Denver. I need someone here. Why? Because I'm tired of living in an empty house. The admission was so unexpected, so raw, that Ivy looked up from the ledgers. He was staring into his glass, his ruined face partially shadowed. Then why not court someone local, someone you could have gotten to know, built a relationship with? I tried that. 5 years ago. His voice was flat. She lasted 3 weeks before she broke the engagement. Couldn't stand the isolation, she said. Couldn't stand being seen with me. The cruelty of it hit Ivy like a physical blow. That's honest? A bitter smile twisted his mouth. She was braver than most. At least she was direct about it. So you decided to import someone who didn't know any better. I decided to be clear about expectations from the start. He met her eyes. No romance, no pretense. A business arrangement. You get security, I get company. Simple. Nothing about this is simple, Rowan. Hearing his name in her voice seemed to affect him. He straightened slightly, his grip tightening on the glass. No, he agreed quietly. I suppose it's not. Ivy closed the ledger, studying him across the desk. In the lamplight, with shadows softening the harsh line of his scar, she could almost see the man from the photograph. Younger, less guarded, capable of laughter. What happened to you? The question slipped out before she could stop it. I told you. I don't mean the scar. I mean you. What happened to make you build all this? She gestured at the room, the house, the empire beyond, and then hide inside it? For a moment she thought he'd retreat into silence again. Then he leaned forward, setting his glass down with deliberate care. You want honesty? Fine. I'll give you honesty. His voice was low, controlled. I learned that people are fundamentally afraid of what they don't understand. That kindness doesn't matter if your face frightens children. That no amount of money or success will make someone want to be seen with you in public if you're marked as different, as damaged. So you stopped trying. I stopped expecting things to be different than they are. He stood, walked to the window. Outside, darkness had fallen completely, the wilderness pressing close. I built something that doesn't require anyone's approval or acceptance. I made myself independent of the world's judgment. And yes, I hide, because hiding is safer than hoping. The pain in his words was almost unbearable. Ivy rose, moved to stand beside him at the window. I'm not afraid of you, she said quietly. You should be. He didn't look at her. You married a stranger out of desperation. You're isolated in the mountains with a man who could be anyone, anything. Fear would be the intelligent response. Intelligence isn't always the same as wisdom. That made him turn. What? It would be intelligent to fear you. You're right about that. But wisdom tells me that a man who reads Marcus Aurelius, who pays his workers fairly, who builds an empire and then lives modestly within it, that man isn't someone to fear. You barely know me. Then give me the chance to know you better. The intensity of his gaze pinned her in place. Why? What does it matter to you? Because I'm going to be living in this house for the foreseeable future, and I'd prefer not to spend that time with a ghost. Something cracked in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. A ghost? That's what you're doing, haunting your own life, existing but not living. And you're an expert on living? The question held an edge. No, Ivy met his eyes steadily. I'm an expert on running away, on choosing safety over risk, on settling for survival instead of reaching for something more. I've spent the last 3 years doing exactly what you're doing, hiding, being afraid, making myself small so the world couldn't hurt me. Then we're well matched, or completely wrong for each other. She took a breath. But either way, we're married now. So we can either spend our lives as polite strangers sharing a house, or we can try something different. Such as friendship. The word felt dangerous, weighted with possibility. Actual partnership, not just a business arrangement. We start being honest with each other, really honest, not just surface answers. We stop hiding. Rowan turned back to the window. Outside, the stars were emerging, brilliant points of light in the mountain darkness. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know if I remember how to do that. Then we'll figure it out together. He was silent for a long time. Then, without looking at her, the scar happened 7 years ago. Timber mill fire. I pulled 3 men out before the roof collapsed. Went back in for a 4th. His hand rose unconsciously to his face. Didn't make it in time. The beam that fell, it trapped him. I tried to lift it, but he stopped, the words choking off. Ivy waited, barely breathing. His name was Daniel. He'd worked for me for 2 years, had a wife in town, a daughter. He was 23 years old. Rowan's voice was hollow, empty. I got him out eventually, but the smoke. He died in my arms before we reached the doctor. The raw pain in his words made Ivy's chest ache. It wasn't your fault. I was responsible for the safety of my workers, for the conditions of that mill. I should have caught the faulty wiring, should have had better fire protocols, should have been faster, stronger, smarter. His shoulders bowed under invisible weight. His wife wouldn't even look at me at the funeral. His daughter screamed when she saw my face. Rowan, that's when I learned what I really looked like to people. Not just scarred, monstrous, a walking reminder of death and failure. He finally turned to face her, and his eyes were dark with grief. So yes, I hide. Because every time I go to town, I see his daughter. And she still looks at me like I'm the thing that killed her father. Ivy's hands clenched at her sides. She wanted to reach for him, to offer comfort, but something told her he wouldn't accept it. Not yet. You saved 3 men, she said instead. I failed 1. You could have died trying. I should have... No. The word came out sharper than she intended. You did what you could. You risked your life trying to save him. The fire killed him, Rowan, not you. Tell that to his widow. The bitterness in his voice was corrosive. Tell that to the little girl who lost her father. I can't, but I can tell you that carrying this guilt, turning yourself into a ghost, it doesn't honor him. It doesn't change anything. It just means the fire claimed 5 victims instead of 1. He stared at her like she'd struck him. You don't understand. I understand grief. I understand guilt. Ivy's voice softened. My father died of a heart attack because I didn't catch how much debt he'd hidden, because I was too focused on my own life to see how much he was struggling. I found him collapsed in his study, surrounded by bills he couldn't pay. And my last words to him earlier that day had been angry ones, about money he'd borrowed without telling me. Rowan's expression shifted, the defensive anger draining away. So yes, Ivy continued, I understand what it's like to carry failure, to replay moments and wish desperately that you'd done something, anything, different. But I also know that guilt doesn't bring anyone back. It just keeps us from moving forward. The silence between them felt different now, not uncomfortable, but weighted with shared understanding. I'm sorry, Rowan said finally. About your father. I'm sorry about Daniel. He nodded slowly, something easing in his stance, then surprising her. Would you like to learn to ride? The subject change was so abrupt it took Ivy a moment to process. Ride? Horses. You'll need to know how if you're going to live here. The terrain is too rough for wagons in many places. He gestured toward the door. Tomorrow morning, if you're willing, before the day gets too hot. It was an offering, she realized. A step toward the partnership she'd proposed. Not a grand gesture, but a genuine one. I'd like that, Ivy said. Good. He moved toward the door, then paused. Ivy? Yes? Thank you. For listening. Thank you for telling me. After he left, Ivy stood alone in the study, her heart pounding. Something had shifted between them, subtle, fragile, but real. The wall he'd built around himself had developed its first crack. She only hoped it wouldn't shatter them both. What? The writing lessons became a morning ritual. Rowan proved to be a patient, methodical teacher. He started with the basics: how to approach a horse, how to check the tack, the proper way to mount. His mare, a gentle chestnut named Autumn, tolerated Ivy's inexperience with remarkable grace. Relax your shoulders, Rowan instructed on the third day, walking alongside as Ivy circled the corral. The horse feels your tension. If you're rigid, she'll assume there's danger. Ivy forced her muscles to loosen, focusing on the rhythm of Autumn's gait. Better. Rowan's voice held a note of approval. Try posting now. Rise with her outside shoulder. It took several attempts, but eventually Ivy found the rhythm. Up, down, matching the horse's movement. Excellent. Rowan stepped back, watching with something that might have been pride. You're a natural. Warmth bloomed in Ivy's chest at the praise. Over the past week, she'd discovered that Rowan's approval was hard-won and genuine. He didn't offer empty flattery, which made his occasional compliments all the more valuable. They were developing a routine, a pattern of coexistence that felt almost comfortable. Mornings were for riding. Afternoons, Rowan worked his land while Ivy managed the household. Evenings brought dinner, still quiet, but no longer silent. Small conversations were emerging. Observations about the weather, discussions of supplies needed from town, careful questions about each other's pasts. It wasn't friendship yet, but it was something. On Friday, Samuel Pritchard arrived with the weekly supply wagon. He greeted Ivy with respectful formality, but his eyes held questions he was too polite to ask. How are you settling in, Mrs. Hale? Well, thank you. Ivy helped him unload crates of provisions. The house is beautiful. Mr. Hale will be pleased to hear that. Samuel lowered his voice. The town's been talking, curious about the new Mrs. Hale. I imagine they are. Some are saying. He hesitated, glancing around to ensure they were alone. Well, they're wondering if you're here of your own free will. Ivy's hand stilled on the crate she was moving. What? Mr. Hale's reputation in town isn't kind. Some folks think he's dangerous. They're worried he might have... Samuel's face flushed. Forgive me, I shouldn't have said anything. No. Ivy's voice was firm. I'm glad you told me. For the record, Mr. Pritchard, I'm here entirely by choice. My husband has been nothing but respectful and honorable. My husband. The words still felt strange, but also increasingly true. Samuel's relief was visible. I'm very glad to hear that, ma'am. I told them as much, but you know how rumors spread. After he left, Ivy stood on the porch, staring at the road to town. Rowan had warned her about talk, but she hadn't fully grasped what he meant. The townspeople didn't just fear him. They'd built him into a monster in their collective imagination. How long had he endured that? 7 years of isolation, of being treated like a threat simply because of his appearance? The injustice of it made her furious. That evening, she brought it up over dinner. Samuel told me what people in town are saying about us. Rowan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. What are they saying? That you might be holding me here against my will. His face went carefully blank. I see. It's absurd. Is it? He set down his fork. You married a stranger. You're isolated on his property with minimal contact with the outside world. From their perspective, it's a reasonable concern. From any rational perspective, it's insulting. Ivy's voice heated. They're treating you like a criminal based on nothing but appearance and gossip. That's how it's always been. His tone was resigned, matter of fact. Well, it's wrong. Rowan looked at her with something like surprise. You're angry on my behalf. Of course I am. You saved 3 men from a fire and nearly died in the attempt, and they've repaid you by turning you into a villain in their stories. She pushed her plate away, appetite gone. It's unjust. Welcome to the frontier, Ivy. Justice isn't guaranteed out here. Then maybe I should go to town. Show them I'm perfectly fine. Correct their ridiculous assumptions. No. The word was sharp, absolute. Why not? Because their good opinion doesn't matter to me, and I won't have you subjecting yourself to their interrogation for my sake. He stood, his movements tense. I've made peace with their fear. I don't need you to defend me. Maybe I'm not doing it for you. Maybe I'm doing it for me. Ivy rose as well, facing him across the table. I'm tired of hiding, Rowan. Tired of letting other people's opinions dictate how I live my life. I did that in Philadelphia, and it nearly destroyed me. This is different. Is it? You're doing exactly what I did, letting fear control you, letting other people's judgments keep you locked away. His expression darkened. You've been here 2 weeks. You don't understand? Then help me understand. Because right now, all I see is a good man punishing himself for something that wasn't his fault, while the world applauds his isolation. The words hung between them, sharp and challenging. Rowan's hands clenched at his sides. For a moment, Ivy thought he might shout, might unleash the anger clearly building behind his controlled facade. Instead, he turned and walked out. The front door closed with deliberate care, not a slam, but a clear ending to the conversation. Ivy sank back into her chair, her heart hammering. She'd pushed too hard, too fast. Challenged the walls he'd spent 7 years building. But damn it, someone needed to. Rowan didn't come in for breakfast the next morning. Mrs. Chen served Ivy alone, her expression carefully neutral. Mr. Hale left early, the cook said in her halting English. Business in the North Timber Tract. I see. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Ivy spent the day in restless frustration, cleaning rooms that didn't need cleaning, reorganizing cupboards that were already organized. Anything to keep her mind occupied. By evening, Rowan still hadn't returned. Ivy ate dinner alone, the silence of the house pressing down like a physical weight. She'd driven him away, pushed when she should have held back, demanded intimacy he clearly wasn't ready to give. She was preparing for bed when she heard the front door open, footsteps in the hall, a pause outside her bedroom door, soft knocking. Come in, Ivy called, pulling her robe tighter. Rowan entered, still in his work clothes, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. He carried something wrapped in cloth. I owe you an apology, he said, without preamble, for walking out, for, he gestured vaguely, everything. You don't... Let me finish. He crossed to the window, set down the wrapped object. You were right. About hiding. About letting fear control me. I've been doing it so long I'd convinced myself it was strength, not cowardice. Ivy's breath caught. Rowan, I went to see Daniel's widow today. The words came out rough, painful. First time since the funeral. I don't know what I thought, that maybe enough time had passed. What happened? She invited me in. His voice held wonder and disbelief. Made tea. We talked. She said... He stopped, composing himself. She said she'd never blamed me. That Daniel had loved his work, had known the risks, that she'd been grieving and angry and had taken it out on the nearest target. Tears pricked Ivy's eyes. And her daughter? At school, I didn't see her. But Martha, Daniel's widow, she said Emily asks about me sometimes. Wants to know if the big man who tried to save Papa is okay. His voice cracked. 7 years I've been carrying this guilt, avoiding them, and she's been worried about me. Ivy crossed the room, stood beside him. I'm glad you went. I wouldn't have without you. He turned to face her. You've been here 2 weeks, and already you've challenged everything I thought I knew about how to survive. It's terrifying, but change usually is. He smiled, actually smiled, the expression transforming his face despite the scar. I brought you something. He unwrapped the cloth, revealing a simple wooden box. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a pistol. Ivy stared at it. I don't understand. You're isolated here. I'm gone frequently. You should know how to protect yourself. He lifted the weapon carefully, showing her the mechanics. It's a Colt 45, standard frontier sidearm. I'll teach you to shoot tomorrow if you're willing. You want me to learn to shoot? Ivy tried to process this. I want you to be safe, to be capable and confident, not dependent on me for protection. His dark eyes held hers. You said you wanted partnership, real partnership. That means trusting you to handle yourself. The gesture struck her more deeply than any romantic offering could have. This wasn't about control or possession, it was about respect, about seeing her as an equal, capable, and strong. Thank you, she managed. I'd be honored to learn. Good. He rewrapped the pistol, set it on her dresser. Then, hesitating, Would you like to see the timber operation? Tomorrow. I could show you the full scope of the business. It was an invitation into his world, his work, the thing he'd built as armor against isolation. I'd love that, Ivy said softly. He nodded, then moved toward the door. Paused at the threshold. Ivy? Yes? I'm glad you pushed, even when it hurt, even when I didn't want to hear it. His voice was quiet. Thank you for not letting me hide. After he left, Ivy sat on the edge of her bed, her heart full of something she couldn't quite name. Hope, perhaps, or possibility. They were still strangers in many ways, still learning the terrain of each other's pasts, navigating the complex landscape of an arranged marriage. But they were also becoming something else. Partners, friends, maybe, eventually, something more. Outside her window, the stars blazed in the mountain darkness, infinite and bright. The frontier was harsh and unforgiving, but it was also beautiful, wild, full of potential for those brave enough to claim it. Ivy Caldwell Hale was beginning to think she might be exactly that brave. The morning air carried the sharp bite of autumn as Rowan led Ivy through the timber tract. Pine scent hung thick and sweet, mixing with the earthy smell of disturbed soil and fresh-cut wood. The path wound upward through dense forest, opening occasionally to reveal valleys carved by glaciers millennia ago. We harvest in sections, Rowan explained, gesturing to marked trees. Never clear-cut. Selective logging maintains the forest health and ensures future growth. Ivy watched him as he spoke, noting the transformation in his bearing. Here, surrounded by his work, his shoulders relaxed. His voice lost its careful guardedness. He moved through the forest with the confidence of someone who knew every rock, every slope, every hidden danger. How many acres do you manage? She asked. Directly? About 3,000. But I hold timber rights to another 5,000 through various agreements. He paused at a massive pine, ran his hand along the bark. This one's probably 200 years old. Won't be touched in my lifetime, or my children's, if I had any. The casual mention of children sent an unexpected flutter through Ivy's chest. She pushed it aside, focusing on the mechanics of his operation. They crested a ridge and the full scope of his empire revealed itself. Below, a network of logging roads snaked through the forest. Crews worked in organized clusters, the rhythmic bite of axes and the grinding rasp of saws creating a distant symphony. Further down the valley, a mill complex sprawled beside a river. Not the one that had burned, Rowan explained quietly, but a newer, safer design he'd built 3 years ago. It's extraordinary, Ivy breathed. It's profitable. But there was pride in his voice, carefully buried but present. And it employs good men, feeds their families. That matters more than the money. A whistle shrieked from the mill. Rowan tensed, his hand moving instinctively to Ivy's shoulder. Protective. Urgent. That's the warning signal, he said, already moving down the trail. Stay close to me. They descended rapidly, Rowan's long strides eating the distance. Ivy hurried behind him, her heart hammering. The whistle continued its piercing cry, joined now by shouting voices. They emerged at the mill yard to find controlled chaos. Workers rushed towards the main building, but not in panic, in organized response. Rowan strode directly to his foreman, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained teeth. What happened, Jack? Saw a blade through a tooth, came within inches of taking off Morrison's arm. Jack jerked his thumb toward a young man sitting on a log pile, pale and shaking but apparently unharmed. Pure luck he jumped back when he did. Rowan was already moving toward the saw assembly, his trained eye assessing the damage. Shut down the main line. I want every blade inspected before we restart operations. Boss, that'll cost us half a day's production. I don't care. Rowan's voice cut like winter wind. Morrison has a wife and a baby at home. Every man here does. Production doesn't matter if someone dies for it. The absolute authority in his tone silenced any objection. Jack nodded, began shouting orders. The mill workers moved with practiced efficiency, the kind that came from working under a leader they trusted. Ivy watched Rowan examine the damaged blade, his scarred face intent and focused. He traced the metal with careful fingers, muttering under his breath. Then he called over his head. Mechanic pointed out stress fractures invisible to Ivy's untrained eye. "Replace all the primary blades," he ordered. "And I want the mounting assemblies checked. This shouldn't have happened." "Yes, sir." Rowan turned to Morrison, who was still sitting in shocked silence. "You're done for the day. Go home to your wife. Full pay." "Mr. Hale, I can work—" "No." Rowan's expression softened fractionally. "You nearly died. Go home. Hold your family. Come back tomorrow with steady hands." Morrison's eyes shone with gratitude and relief. "Thank you, sir." After the crisis settled, Rowan led Ivy to his office, a simple structure overlooking the mill yard. Inside, maps covered every wall, showing timber tracks, property boundaries, and logging roads. A desk buried under paperwork occupied one corner. "Coffee?" Rowan offered, moving to a pot on a small stove. "Please." He poured 2 cups, handed her one. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and Ivy felt that now familiar flutter of awareness. She was becoming attuned to him, the way he moved, the subtle shifts in his expression, the rare moments when his guard lowered completely. "You handled that well," she said. "It's my responsibility." He leaned against the desk. "Every man who works for me trusts that I'll keep him safe. When something like this happens," he gestured sharply, "it's a failure. My failure. The blade failed, not you. I chose the supplier. I approved the installation schedule. If I'd insisted on more frequent inspections—" "Rowan." Ivy set down her cup, moved to stand directly in front of him. "You can't prevent every possible accident. You can only respond with integrity when they happen, which is exactly what you did." He studied her face, something searching in his gaze. "You defend me constantly, even to myself." "Someone should." A smile ghosted across his lips, there and gone, but genuine. "You're nothing like I expected when I wrote that advertisement." "What did you expect?" "Someone quieter, more compliant, someone who'd accept the arrangement and ask no questions." He shook his head. "Instead, I got you. Stubborn, challenging, refusing to let me wallow in my carefully constructed isolation." "Disappointed?" "Terrified," he admitted, but not disappointed. The honesty in his words stole Ivy's breath. She was acutely aware of how close they stood, of the way the afternoon light caught the silver threads in his dark hair, of the warmth radiating from his large frame. "We should head back," Rowan said, but he didn't move. "Mrs. Chen will have dinner ready." "Yes," Ivy agreed, also not moving. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and uncertainty. Then Rowan stepped back, the spell breaking. "I'll show you the new safety protocols on the way," he said, his voice carefully neutral again. "I want your opinion on the training schedule." As they walked back through the forest, Ivy's mind whirled. Something was building between them. Undeniable, inevitable, terrifying. The careful boundaries of their arrangement were beginning to blur, and she didn't know if that was dangerous or exactly what she needed. That evening, Rowan taught her to shoot. They set up targets behind the barn, empty bottles balanced on fence posts. The Colt was heavier than Ivy expected, the metal cold and solid in her grip. "Hold it like this," Rowan instructed, positioning himself behind her. His hands covered hers, adjusting her grip. "Firm but not tense. The recoil will surprise you the first time." Ivy was acutely conscious of his presence, his chest against her back, his breath stirring her hair. She forced herself to focus on the weapon, on his instructions. "Line up the sights, front post centered between the rear notches. When you're ready, squeeze the trigger. Don't pull. Smooth, steady pressure." She squeezed. The gun roared, kicking back against her palms with brutal force. The bottle remained untouched. "Again," Rowan said calmly. "You flinched in anticipation. Trust the weapon." They practiced until the sun began to set, until Ivy's arms ached and her ears rang despite the cotton wadding Rowan had insisted she use. By the end, she'd shattered 3 bottles and felt a fierce satisfaction at each successful hit. "You're a natural," Rowan said as they cleaned the weapon together in the fading light. Most people take weeks to develop that kind of accuracy. I had a good teacher. He glanced at her, something warm in his expression. I'm glad you're learning this. It matters to me that you can protect yourself. Why? The question emerged before Ivy could stop it. Why does it matter so much? Rowan was quiet for a long moment, his hands moving over the gun with practiced efficiency. Because I couldn't protect Daniel. Couldn't save him. Couldn't make his death mean anything except loss. He set down the cleaning cloth. But I can make sure you're never helpless, never dependent on my presence for your safety. That's within my power to give you. The grief underlying his words made Ivy's throat tight. You're giving me autonomy. I'm giving you strength. There's a difference. She understood then, with crystalline clarity, what he was really offering. Not just shooting lessons, but respect, recognition of her capability, her right to self-determination. In a world where women were expected to be decorative and dependent, he was teaching her to be dangerous. Thank you, she said quietly, for seeing me as more than just a wife you acquired. Ivy. He turned to face her fully. I've never seen you as acquired. From the moment you stepped off that stagecoach with your chin up and your eyes clear, refusing to flinch from my face, you've been your own person. I'm just trying to give you the tools to stay that way. The tenderness in his voice undid something in Ivy's chest. She reached out, placed her hand over his where it rested on the gun case. You're a good man, Rowan Hale. His fingers turned, clasping hers. You make me want to be. They stood together in the gathering darkness, hands linked, the weight of unspoken feelings pressing against the boundaries they'd established. Then Rowan gently withdrew, his expression carefully controlled once more. We should go in. It's getting cold. But as they walked back to the house, their shoulders brushed with each step, and neither moved away. The following week brought the first snow, light flurries that dusted the mountains like powdered sugar. Ivy woke to a transformed landscape, everything softened and quiet under the white blanket. At breakfast, Rowan studied the weather through the window with a concerned expression. Storm's coming, he announced. A big one, if I'm reading the signs correctly. We need to prepare. What do we need to do? His eyes met hers, approval glinting in their depths. No hesitation, no fear, just practical readiness. Stock the woodshed, secure the outbuildings, bring extra supplies from the storehouse. If we get snowed in, we could be isolated for days. They worked together throughout the morning, Ivy learning the rhythms of frontier preparation. Rowan showed her how to stack wood for maximum drying, how to check the barn roof for weak points, how to ensure the well pump wouldn't freeze. Mrs. Chen prepared enough food to last a week, her experienced hands moving with efficient speed. She spoke to Ivy in a mix of English and gestures, explaining how to manage supplies if the storm lasted longer than expected. By afternoon, the snow was falling in earnest, thick, heavy flakes that reduced visibility to mere yards. The temperature plummeted. Rowan brought the horses into the barn, bedding them down with extra hay. We're ready, he said as they stood on the porch, watching the storm intensify. Whatever comes, we can handle it. The wind picked up, howling around the house like a living thing. Ivy shivered despite her wool shawl. Come inside, Rowan said softly. I'll build up the fire. That evening, they sat together in the front room, the fireplace blazing against the storm's fury. Outside, the world disappeared into whirling white. Inside, lamplight created a bubble of warmth and safety. Rowan had brought down a chessboard. Do you play? He asked. My father taught me. They set up the pieces in companionable silence. Ivy discovered that Rowan played chess like he did everything else, carefully, strategically, with an eye toward long-term consequences. But she'd learned from a master, and she gave him a genuine challenge. Check, she announced, sliding her bishop into position. Rowan studied the board, surprise crossing his features. Clever. I didn't see that coming. You were focused on my knight. I used your attention against you. Devious. But he was smiling. I approve. They played 3 games, trading victories. Between moves, they talked, really talked, in a way they hadn't before. Rowan told her about learning the timber trade, about the years of hard labor that had built his current success. Ivy shared stories of Philadelphia, of her father's bookshop and the life she'd left behind. "Do you miss it?" Rowan asked. "The city?" Ivy considered the question honestly. "Sometimes. I miss the libraries, the theaters, the sense of endless possibility." She moved her rook. "But I don't miss feeling trapped. Don't miss the weight of expectations and debts, and all the ways I was slowly disappearing into someone I didn't recognize." "And here? Do you feel trapped here?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. "Here I feel challenged, like I'm becoming someone stronger." Rowan's gaze held hers across the chessboard. "You were always strong. You just needed space to remember it." The storm raged on through the night, but inside the house something else was building. A different kind of storm, made of lingering glances and accidental touches and words left carefully unspoken. They fell asleep in their separate rooms, but Ivy lay awake for hours, listening to the wind howl and thinking about the man across the hall, the stranger who was becoming familiar, the arrangement that was transforming into something far more complicated. Morning brought a world encased in white. Snow had drifted against the house, creating sculpted waves that reached halfway up the first-floor windows. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt sacred. Rowan and Ivy stood together on the porch, surveying the transformation. "Beautiful," Ivy whispered, "and deadly." Rowan pointed toward the tree line. "We'll need to check the livestock, clear paths to the essential buildings. The temperature's still dropping. This snow won't melt for weeks." They spent the day in hard physical labor, digging paths through drifts that reached Ivy's waist. Despite the cold, despite the difficulty, Ivy found herself laughing, actually laughing, as she and Rowan worked side by side. "You're enjoying this," Rowan observed, pausing to catch his breath. "I am." Ivy leaned on her shovel, her cheeks flushed from exertion. "Is that strange?" "No." His expression softened. "It's good. You should enjoy things. So should you." He didn't answer, but something in his face shifted, a kind of wondering recognition, as if she'd pointed out something he'd forgotten existed. That evening, Mrs. Chen informed them she'd be staying in her quarters attached to the kitchen, rather than attempting the walk to her small house on the property's edge. Rowan and Ivy found themselves alone in the main house, the storm's aftermath having created a cocoon of isolation. They shared dinner by firelight, the dining room too cold to use comfortably. Rowan brought their plates to the front room and they ate sitting on the floor near the hearth, like children at a picnic. "Tell me about the photograph," Ivy said. "The one in the library. Who were those other men?" Rowan's fork paused. She thought he might retreat again, but instead he set down his plate and leaned back against the sofa. "We called ourselves the Timber Kings, stupid young men who thought we'd conquer the frontier." A sad smile touched his lips. "There were 5 of us originally, met working a lumber camp in Oregon, decided to strike out on our own." "What happened to them?" "Thomas, the one on the left, he went to California, married a woman from San Francisco, runs a furniture business now. We exchange letters once a year." Rowan's voice grew quieter. "Marcus, the tall one, died in the logging accident I mentioned. River crossing during spring flood. The water took him before we could reach him." "I'm sorry." "Daniel you know about." Rowan's hand rose unconsciously to his scar. "And then there was Cole." Something in the way he said the name made Ivy's attention sharpen. "Cole was my best friend, like a brother." Rowan stared into the fire. "We built this whole operation together. He was the dreamer, big ideas, bigger ambitions. I was the practical one, making his visions work. We were going to be partners for life." "What happened?" "He fell in love." Rowan's voice went flat, emotionless. "With a woman from town. She was beautiful, charming, everything a man could want. He was completely besotted. And she couldn't stand the sight of me." The words came out bitter. "After the fire, after I got the scar, she made it clear that she wouldn't marry Cole if I remained his partner. Said she couldn't be associated with someone who looked like me. Said it would hurt Cole's standing in the community." Ivy's hands clenched in her lap. "That's monstrous." "Cole argued with her at first, but she was persistent, and he loved her. Eventually, he came to me with an offer to buy out my share of the business." "You built it together?" "Yes." Rowan's jaw tightened. I refused at first, but she made his life hell, convinced him I was holding him back, that my appearance was damaging his reputation. Finally, he gave me an ultimatum: sell my share or lose his friendship entirely. So you bought him out instead? Surprise flickered across Rowan's face. How did you know? Because that's exactly what you would do. Rather than let him sacrifice his dream for a woman who demanded it, you took the burden on yourself. I couldn't let her destroy what we'd built, but I also couldn't watch him choose her over me every day. Rowan's voice cracked slightly. So I bought his share, paid him more than it was worth, and told him to be happy. Last I heard, they'd married and moved to Denver. Do you regret it? Every day. The admission was raw, painful. But I'd do it again. Because at least this way, something we created survives, even if we don't survive together. Ivy moved closer until their shoulders touched. You carry so much loss. Everyone does. But his voice was thick with emotion. I'm not special in that regard. Maybe not, but you carry it alone. That's the difference. Rowan turned to look at her, and in his eyes, Ivy saw a devastating loneliness that matched her own. Two people who'd learned to survive by building walls, by expecting nothing, by making themselves impervious to hope. I'm tired, Rowan whispered, so tired of being alone. Then stop. Ivy's hand found his. You're not alone anymore, I'm here. For how long? Until you get tired of the isolation, of the rumors, of being married to a scarred hermit. The words held no accusation, just weary resignation. I don't blame you if you want to leave eventually. Everyone does. I'm not everyone. Ivy, I mean it. She gripped his hand tighter. I didn't come here looking for an escape route. I came looking for a new beginning. And yes, this started as a practical arrangement, but it's becoming something else. Something real. You deserve better than this. Better than me. Don't tell me what I deserve. Anger flashed through her. I've spent my whole life being told what I deserve, what I should want, what's appropriate for someone like me. I'm done with that. I know what I want. What do you want? The question was barely audible. Ivy took a breath, stepped off the cliff of caution. You, this. A partnership that's honest and real. A life where we stop hiding and start actually living. Rowan stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. For a long moment, they sat frozen, balanced on the edge of something that would change everything. Then Rowan's free hand rose, cupped her face with surprising gentleness. I don't know how to do this, he said. How to be close to someone. How to let myself hope. Neither do I. Ivy leaned into his touch. We'll figure it out together. His thumb traced her cheekbone, his scarred face open and vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I'm afraid. So am I. Of what? Of how much I'm starting to care about you. The confession emerged raw and honest. Of how much it would hurt to lose this. Ivy. Her name was a prayer, a plea. I can't promise I won't fail you. I don't need promises. I just need you to try. The space between them contracted, narrowed to nothing. Rowan's eyes searched hers, looking for certainty she couldn't offer. Only hope, fragile and fierce. I want to kiss you, he said quietly. But I need you to understand, if we cross this line, I won't be able to go back to the arrangement as it was. I won't be able to pretend this is just business. Good. Ivy's heart hammered wildly. Because I don't want business. I want this. I want you. He kissed her then, gentle at first, almost hesitant, as if afraid she might shatter. Ivy responded with all the emotion she'd been holding back, her hands sliding into his hair, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, transformed from tentative to claiming. Rowan's arms came around her, crushing her against his chest, and Ivy felt the full force of his restraint breaking. Months, years of loneliness and denial crumbling under the weight of connection finally acknowledged. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rowan pressed his forehead to hers. This terrifies me, he admitted. Me too. But I don't want to stop. Neither do I. They sat together in the firelight, holding each other, the storm's aftermath forgotten. Outside, the world was frozen and silent. Inside, something new was beginning, fragile as spring ice, but undeniably real. "Stay with me tonight," Rowan whispered. "Not for... I just don't want to be alone." "Neither do I." They moved to the sofa. Ivy curled against Rowan's chest, his arms wrapped around her like a shield against the darkness. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Tell me something true," Ivy murmured. "Something you've never told anyone." Rowan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I used to be afraid of mirrors. After the fire. Couldn't stand to see what I'd become. I covered every reflective surface in the house for the first year." "What changed?" "I realized I had two choices. Let the scar define me, or define myself despite it." His hand stroked her hair absently. "I chose the latter, but it didn't make the fear go away. Just made me better at living with it." "I used to be afraid of being invisible," Ivy confessed, "of disappearing into the background of my own life until there was nothing left of who I really was. That's why I answered your advertisement, because being a stranger's wife in the wilderness seemed less terrifying than fading away in Philadelphia. You could never be invisible." Rowan's voice was fierce. "You burn too bright." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's warmth, the boundaries between them dissolving like snow in spring sunlight. And when Ivy woke hours later to find herself still in Rowan's arms, his breath steady and deep in sleep, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace, safety, home. The morning brought clarity and complications in equal measure. Ivy woke first, extracting herself carefully from Rowan's embrace. He stirred but didn't wake. His face relaxed in sleep, the scar just another feature rather than the defining one. She stood watching him for a long moment, this man who'd become so much more than she'd expected. Then she went to start the coffee, her mind whirling with questions about what happened next. Rowan found her in the kitchen an hour later, his hair disheveled, his expression uncertain. "Good morning," Ivy said softly. "Morning." He poured himself coffee, his movements careful. "About last night?" "No regrets," Ivy interrupted. "Unless you have them?" "No, never." His eyes met hers. "But we should talk about what this means, what we want from each other." Ivy nodded, gestured to the table. They sat across from each other, the morning light harsh and honest. "I don't want to pretend nothing's changed," Rowan said, "but I also don't want to rush into something neither of us is ready for." "Agreed." Ivy wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "So what do we do?" "We take it slow. We're honest with each other about what we're feeling, and we accept that this is new territory for both of us." "Can I add something, please?" "We stop sleeping in separate rooms." At his surprised look, she clarified, "Not for... I just mean what we did last night. Sharing space. Being close. I don't want to go back to that kind of isolation." Rowan's expression softened. "I'd like that. More than you know." They were still figuring out the details when Samuel Pritchard arrived with the mail, having made the treacherous journey despite the snow. "Thought you folks might want these," he said, handing over a bundle of letters. "Some came all the way from Philadelphia." Ivy's heart sank as she recognized the handwriting on one envelope. Her aunt, the woman who'd raised her after her parents died, who'd slowly poisoned every aspect of Ivy's life with criticism and control disguised as concern. Rowan noticed her expression. "Bad news?" "Potentially." Ivy opened the letter with trembling fingers. The words were exactly what she'd feared. Her aunt had heard about the marriage, was horrified that Ivy had thrown herself away on some frontier brute, and demanded that Ivy return immediately to Philadelphia where appropriate arrangements could be made. "She wants me to come back," Ivy said numbly. "Says the marriage can be annulled since it hasn't been consummated." Heat flooded her cheeks at the intimate detail her aunt discussed so clinically. Rowan's face went carefully blank. "Is that what you want?" "What?" "No." Ivy set down the letter. "Rowan, I'm not leaving." "You could." His voice was controlled, emotionless. "You'd be within your rights. The arrangement was my idea. If you want to go back, I won't stop you." "Look at me." She waited until his eyes met hers. "I'm not going anywhere. My aunt doesn't control my life anymore. Neither does anyone else except me. She's your family. You're my family now. The words emerged with fierce certainty. This is my home. You are my home. Something cracked in Rowan's expression. Relief and wonder and disbelief all tangled together. You mean that? With everything in me. He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. I don't deserve you. Stop saying that. Ivy pulled back enough to look at him. We deserve each other. We deserve happiness. And I'll fight anyone who tries to tell us otherwise, including my interfering aunt. Rowan actually laughed, a real, full laugh that transformed his entire face. Fierce. You have no idea. He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and Ivy felt the last of her doubts burn away. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't settling or running away or any of the things her aunt would claim. This was choosing. Actively, deliberately choosing a life that was hers. When they finally separated, Rowan kept his arms around her, his chin resting on her head. Write back to her, he said quietly. Tell her you're staying. Tell her whatever you need to tell her to end this. She won't accept it easily. I don't care. His voice was steel-wrapped in velvet. You're my wife. This is your home. And if she wants to challenge that, she'll have to go through me. The protectiveness in his words made Ivy's throat tight. She'd spent so long fighting her battles alone, protecting herself because no one else would. Having someone stand beside her, someone strong enough to be a true partner, felt like finally being able to set down a weight she'd been carrying her entire life. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For choosing me back. His arms tightened around her. Always. Ivy composed the letter to her aunt that same afternoon, each word deliberate and final. She wrote at the desk in the library, Rowan working quietly across the room on his account books, his presence a solid comfort. The words came easier than she'd expected. Years of resentment and suppressed anger poured onto the page, not cruelly, but with unflinching honesty. She thanked her aunt for raising her, acknowledged the debt she owed, and then made it absolutely clear that she was staying in Colorado, that her marriage was real and chosen, that her old life in Philadelphia was exactly that, old, finished, done. When she sealed the envelope, her hands were steady. It's done, she said. Rowan looked up from his ledgers. How do you feel? Free. The word surprised her with its truth. Terrified and free. He crossed to her, read the address on the envelope. Samuel can take this to town tomorrow. Once it's sent, there's no taking it back. I don't want to take it back. His hand found hers squeezed gently. Then we moved forward. But moving forward proved more complicated than either of them anticipated. The next 2 weeks brought a delicate dance of adjustment as they navigated their transformed relationship. They shared Rowan's bed now, not for passion, not yet, but for the simple human comfort of not sleeping alone. Ivy would wake in the night to find herself curled against his broad back, or his arm heavy across her waist, and feel a contentment she'd never known existed. During the day, they fell into new rhythms. Rowan taught Ivy the business side of the timber operation, showing her the contracts, the projections, the careful balance of harvest and sustainability. She proved to have a head for numbers that surprised them both. You could run this operation yourself, Rowan said one afternoon, watching her efficiently reorganize his chaotic filing system. I don't want to run it myself. I want to run it with you. The distinction mattered, and they both knew it, but the easy partnership had cracks. Rowan still retreated into silence when certain topics arose. His past before the timber operation, his relationship with Cole, the full extent of his isolation. And Ivy found herself holding back too, afraid to push too hard, to demand too much, to risk shattering this fragile new thing between them. The breaking point came on a gray February morning when Rowan announced he needed to go to Denver on business. How long? Ivy asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. 3 days, maybe 4. He was packing his saddlebags, not meeting her eyes. There's a timber contract I need to finalize in person. I could come with you. No. The word came too fast, too sharp. The journey's too rough this time of year. Ivy's hand stilled on the breakfast dishes she'd been clearing. You don't want me there. That's not... Rowan stopped, frustration crossing his face. It's complicated. Then explain it to me. He turned away, busied himself with unnecessary adjustments to his gear. Denver's different from here. There are people who knew me before, who remember what you looked like before the fire. Understanding hit like cold water. You're ashamed to be seen with me there. What? No! Rowan spun to face her, genuine shock on his features. Ivy, that's not... It's the opposite. I'm ashamed for you to be seen with me. The rawness in his voice stopped her anger cold. What? In Denver, I'm not just the scarred hermit everyone avoids. I'm the man who used to be part of society, who had friends and standing and a future. He gestured sharply at his face. They'll look at you and wonder what's wrong with you that you'd marry someone like me. They'll pity you or think you're being coerced, or they'll see a woman who chose her husband freely and loves him. The words emerged before Ivy could stop them, hanging in the air between them like smoke. Rowan went absolutely still. What did you say? Ivy's heart hammered, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. I said I love you, and I'm not ashamed of that. And I won't be hidden away like some embarrassing secret because you're afraid of what people might think. Ivy? No. She moved toward him, her hands clenched at her sides. I understand you're scared. I understand you've been hurt and judged and made to feel like you're something to hide. But I won't participate in that. I won't pretend our marriage is shameful or wrong. I never said it was shameful. Then take me with you. It was a challenge, direct and unavoidable. Introduce me to your business contacts. Let me stand beside you as your wife, not hide up here like I don't exist. Rowan's jaw worked, emotions warring across his ruined face. You don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to choose me, to choose us, to stop letting your fear make decisions for both of us. The silence stretched painful and taut. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Inside, everything hung on Rowan's next words. Fine, he said finally, his voice rough. We'll go together, but don't say I didn't warn you. Ivy wanted to argue, to push back against his assumption that she'd regret it. But the raw vulnerability in his expression stopped her. This was costing him something, courage she couldn't fully understand because she'd never carried his particular burden. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded once, sharp and final, then returned to his packing with jerky, agitated movements. The journey to Denver took 2 days of hard riding. Rowan had wanted to hire a coach, but Ivy insisted on riding Autumn. She'd grown confident in the saddle, and the independence felt important. A statement that she was choosing this, not being transported like cargo. They stopped the first night at a way station, a rough establishment that served travelers heading to and from the mountain mining towns. Ivy noticed the looks they drew, the other guests' eyes skittering away from Rowan's face, the whispered conversations that stopped when they approached. Rowan noticed too. His shoulders drew tight, his expression closing down into the blank mask she'd learned to hate. Let them stare, Ivy said quietly as they ate a grim dinner of stew and hard bread. They don't matter. They're just the beginning. Rowan's voice was flat. Wait until we reach Denver. Then I'll face it in Denver. She reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. Together. His fingers turned, gripped hers almost painfully tight. I don't deserve you. You keep saying that. Maybe someday you'll believe me when I say you're wrong. Denver sprawled across the high plains like a promise of civilization carved from wilderness. As they rode down the broad avenues, Ivy took in the elegant buildings, the electric streetlights, the well-dressed crowds moving with urban purpose. After months in the mountains, the sheer density of humanity felt overwhelming. Rowan led them to a hotel, not the grandest in the city, but respectable, solid. The desk clerk's eyes widened when he saw Rowan's face, but he maintained professional courtesy. Mr. Hale, welcome back. Your usual room? 2 rooms, Rowan said. My wife and I will need 1 room, Ivy interrupted smoothly. We're married. We'll share. The clerk's gaze flicked between them, curiosity barely concealed. Of course, Mrs. Hale. I'll have your bags sent up immediately. In the privacy of their room, spacious, with a real bed and running water that seemed like impossible luxury, Rowan finally let his careful control crack. You didn't have to do that, he said, pacing like a caged animal. Insist on 1 room. People will talk. People are already talking. They were talking the moment we walked through the door. Ivy removed her traveling coat, shook dust from her skirts. At least this way they're talking about something true, that we're married and together. Ivy, you don't understand how vicious society can be, don't I? She turned to face him. I grew up in Philadelphia society, Rowan. I know exactly how cruel people can be with their polite smiles and their whispered judgments. I just stopped caring what they think. When? When did you stop caring? When I married you. The simple truth of it settled over her like a benediction. The moment I chose this life, I gave up the right to care about their opinions, and I've never regretted it. Rowan stared at her, something breaking open in his expression. I've been so afraid. I know. Not just of them judging you, of you realizing you made a mistake, of watching you slowly come to regret choosing me. His voice cracked. Every day I wake up expecting you to look at me differently, to see what everyone else sees. Ivy crossed to him, took his scarred face between her hands. I see a man who saved 3 lives at the cost of his own comfort, who built an empire from nothing through sheer will and hard work, who treats his workers fairly and reads philosophy by firelight, and taught me to shoot because he wanted me to be strong. Her thumbs traced his cheekbones, the raised tissue of his scar. I see the man I love. That's all I've ever seen. Ivy. Her name was a broken prayer. I need you to believe me, she whispered. I need you to trust that this is real, that I'm not going anywhere, that you're allowed to be happy. He kissed her then, desperate and claiming, his hands tangling in her hair. Ivy responded with equal hunger, months of careful restraint finally breaking under the weight of acknowledged love. They tumbled onto the bed together, a tangle of limbs and shed clothing and breathless laughter. For the first time since their wedding night, the specter of propriety and arrangement fell away completely. There was only Rowan and Ivy, husband and wife, choosing each other with full knowledge and free will. Afterward, they lay tangled together, the Denver streets noisy beyond the window but feeling impossibly far away. I love you, Rowan said into her hair. I've been trying not to, trying to protect myself from the inevitable disappointment, but I can't anymore. I love you, Ivy Hale. Tears pricked Ivy's eyes. Say it again. I love you. He pulled back to look at her, his scarred face open and vulnerable. I love you, I love you. I love you too. She kissed him softly. And tomorrow, when we go to your business meeting, I'm going to stand beside you and make sure everyone knows it. Fear flickered across his features, but also something else, hope, fragile and new. All right, he said. All right. The business meeting took place in an elegant office overlooking downtown Denver. Rowan's contact was a man named Harrison Blackwell, timber merchant and investor, whose shrewd eyes missed nothing. Rowan, he greeted warmly, shaking hands. Then his gaze found Ivy. And this must be the mysterious wife I've heard whispers about. Mysterious? Ivy raised an eyebrow, accepting his hand. A man like Rowan suddenly married after years of determined bachelorhood. The rumor mills have been churning. Blackwell's smile was friendly but assessing. I'm delighted to meet you, Mrs. Hale. The pleasure is mutual, Mr. Blackwell. They settled into leather chairs, and the meeting proceeded with business-like efficiency. Rowan discussed timber contracts, delivery schedules, projected yields for the coming season. Ivy listened carefully, occasionally asking questions that Blackwell answered with growing respect. You know the business, he observed after she'd queried the logistics of rail transport versus river shipping. I'm learning, Ivy said. My husband is an excellent teacher. The meeting concluded with a new contract signed, favorable terms that would significantly expand Rowan's operation. As they prepared to leave, Blackwell addressed Rowan directly. I'm glad you found someone, he said quietly. After everything with Cole, I worried you'd isolate yourself completely. Rowan's expression went carefully neutral. Cole made his choice. A foolish one, if you ask me. Blackwell glanced at Ivy. His loss appears to be Mrs. Hale's gain. Outside, walking back toward their hotel through the crisp afternoon, Ivy finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. What happened with Cole and Blackwell? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Blackwell offered Cole a partnership in his Denver operation. Better terms than I could match. Cole turned him down because he wanted to stay partnered with me. Until his fiancée changed his mind. Until then, yes. Rowan's voice was tight. Blackwell was furious with Cole, said he'd thrown away both his friendship and his future for a woman who didn't deserve either. Does Blackwell know about the buyout? No one knows the real story except me and Cole. He stopped walking, turned to face her. Cole let everyone believe he chose to leave because he got a better offer elsewhere. I let him because protecting his reputation felt easier than explaining the truth. Ivy's heart ached for him. You protected him even after he chose someone else over you. He was my brother in everything but blood. What else could I do? She took his hand, standing on the busy Denver street, forcing him to meet her eyes. You could have been angry. You could have told the truth. You could have let him face the consequences of his choice. I was angry. I still am, sometimes. His grip tightened on her hands. But I also loved him. Love doesn't just disappear because someone hurts you. No, Ivy agreed softly. It doesn't. They stood together in the fading afternoon light, the city moving around them, two people learning the hard truth that love meant vulnerability and risk and the possibility of devastating loss. Come on, Rowan said finally. There's somewhere I want to take you. He led her through Denver's streets to a small gallery tucked between a haberdashery and a bookstore. Inside, paintings covered every wall, landscapes mostly, capturing the wild beauty of the Colorado mountains with stunning skill. These are extraordinary, Ivy breathed, moving from canvas to canvas. The artist is a friend of mine, Rowan said, or was, before the fire. We've been corresponding by letter, but I haven't seen her in person since you started hiding. Yes. He stood before a painting of a valley at sunset, golden light spilling across pine forests. She asked me to visit months ago. I kept making excuses. A woman emerged from the back room, tall, with silver-streaked hair and paint-stained hands. Her eyes went wide when she saw Rowan. My stars! Rowan Hale, in the flesh. She crossed to him with long strides, pulled him into a fierce hug. I was beginning to think you'd become a myth. Hello, Catherine. Rowan's voice was warm, genuinely pleased. I'm sorry it took so long. Catherine pulled back, studied his face without flinching. The scar healed well, better than the letters suggested. You always did have an artist's eye for detail. And you always did hide behind deflection. Her gaze shifted to Ivy. You must be the wife, the one who finally dragged this stubborn man back into the world. Ivy Hale. She accepted Catherine's paint-stained hand. Your work is beautiful. Thank you, dear. Come, let me show you the new pieces. For the next hour, they wandered the gallery while Catherine explained her techniques, her inspirations, the stories behind each landscape. Ivy watched Rowan slowly relax, the careful guardedness melting away as he talked art and light and perspective with someone who clearly knew him well. You should see the studio, Catherine said eventually. I'm working on a new series about the changing seasons in the high country. Rowan, you're in some of them. I painted from memory and old sketches. In the studio, Catherine showed them a series of canvases in various stages of completion. And there, in several pieces, Ivy saw a younger Rowan, whole-faced, laughing, working alongside timber crews or standing on mountain ridges with arms outstretched to the sky. These are remarkable, Ivy said softly. Their memory, Catherine replied. Before the fire changed everything. Rowan stood silent before a painting of himself and 4 other men. The Timber Kings, Ivy realized, the same group from the photograph, but rendered in vibrant color and movement. Does it hurt? Catherine asked gently. Seeing what was. Less than I expected, Rowan admitted. Maybe because I've finally stopped wishing I could go back to it. Catherine's knowing gaze shifted between Rowan and Ivy. Love will do that. Make the past bearable because the present is worth living. They stayed until the gallery closed, talking and laughing and sharing stories. As they finally said goodbye, Catherine pulled Rowan aside. She's good for you, Ivy heard her say. Don't let fear make you stupid again. I'll try not to. And Rowan, come back, not in 6 months or a year. Actually come back. Bring your wife. Let me paint you both together. I will. I promise. Walking back to the hotel in the gathering dusk, Rowan's hand found Ivy's, their fingers interlacing naturally. Thank you, he said. For what? For pushing me to come here. For standing beside me. For He stopped walking, pulled her close. For loving me enough to make me face the things I've been running from. You're not running anymore. No. He kissed her forehead. I'm not. That night, they made love again, slower this time, deliberate and tender, mapping each other's bodies with reverent attention. Afterward, tangled together in the hotel bed, Ivy felt something shift deep in her chest. Not just contentment or even happiness, but a bone-deep certainty that this was where she belonged. Tell me something you've never told anyone, she whispered into the darkness. Rowan was quiet for so long she thought he might have fallen asleep. Then, I used to imagine dying. After the fire, when the pain was worst and everyone looked at me with pity or fear, I'd imagine just disappearing. Not violently, just ceasing to exist. The confession pierced Ivy's heart. Rowan, I don't anymore, he continued. Haven't in months. Because you make me want to stay. You make me want to see what tomorrow brings. Tears slipped down Ivy's cheeks, hot against her skin. Promise me something. Anything. Promise you'll never disappear. Promise you'll fight to stay, even when it's hard, even when the darkness comes back. His arms tightened around her. I promise. As long as you promise the same. I promise. They held each other in the darkness, two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other's arms, and made silent vows to keep choosing life, choosing love, choosing the difficult work of being happy. The return journey to the homestead felt different somehow, lighter, as if they'd shed some invisible burden in Denver. They rode side by side, talking easily, planning improvements to the house and expansions to the timber operation. I want to build a greenhouse, Ivy announced as they climbed into familiar mountain territory. Somewhere to grow vegetables year-round, maybe even flowers. Flowers? Rowan's tone was gently teasing. Practical Ivy wants flowers? Practical Ivy wants beauty. She shot him a smile. Is that so surprising? No. His expression softened. Not anymore. They arrived home to find Mrs. Chen had kept everything running smoothly in their absence. The house felt warmer somehow, more alive, as if their acknowledged love had transformed it from mere shelter into actual home. That evening, sitting together in the library with books and whiskey and the comfortable silence of true companionship, Ivy felt a contentment so profound it was almost frightening. What are you thinking? Rowan asked, looking up from his reading. That I'm happy. The admission felt vulnerable, dangerous, genuinely, terrifyingly happy. Terrifying. Because now I have something to lose. She set down her book. Before you, I had nothing I cared about deeply enough to fear losing. Now I have everything. Rowan crossed to her chair, knelt beside it so their eyes were level. You won't lose me. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. Life is unpredictable, dangerous. Then we'll face it together. He took her hands. Whatever comes, joy or sorrow, triumph or disaster, we'll face it together. That's what partnership means. Together, Ivy echoed, the word a vow and a prayer. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, a promise sealed with touch. But even as they held each other, even as they whispered endearments and planned futures, neither could know that their greatest test was still ahead, that the past Rowan had tried so hard to bury was about to resurface, that the strength of their partnership would soon be tested by fire and betrayal and truths too painful to face. For now, though, they had this moment, this perfect, fragile moment of hard-won happiness, and that would have to be enough. Spring came to the mountains with reluctant grace, snow melting in patches to reveal earth hungry for warmth. Ivy threw herself into plans for the greenhouse, sketching designs and calculating costs while Rowan managed the busiest season of the timber operation. Their evenings were spent in companionable exhaustion, sharing the details of their separate days before falling into bed together, their bodies finding familiar comfort in each other's arms. It was during one of these peaceful evenings, nearly 6 months after their Denver trip, that the knock came at the door. Mrs. Chen answered it, her voice carrying from the hallway in sharp, surprised tones. Then footsteps, and she appeared in the library doorway with an expression Ivy had never seen on her usually impassive face, something between shock and disapproval. Mr. Cole here to see you, she announced, the words clipped and cold. Rowan went absolutely still, the book in his hands forgotten. Color drained from his face, leaving the scar a livid slash of white tissue. Cole, he repeated, the name barely a whisper. Should I send him away? Mrs. Chen's tone made it clear what she thought should happen. No. Rowan set down his book with careful precision, his movements controlled. Show him in. Ivy's stomach clenched. She'd heard so much about Cole, the former partner, the man Rowan had considered a brother, the betrayal that had driven him deeper into isolation. And now he was here, in their home, for reasons Ivy couldn't begin to guess. Cole entered the library like a man walking to his execution. He was shorter than Rowan but well-built, with sandy hair and hazel eyes that held shadows Ivy recognized. He stopped just inside the doorway, taking in the scene. Rowan standing rigid by the fireplace, Ivy curled in her chair with a book, the domestic intimacy of the space. Rowan, he said, his voice rough, thank you for seeing me. This is my wife, Ivy. Rowan's voice was carefully neutral. Ivy, this is Cole Brennan. Cole's gaze shifted to her, and something complicated crossed his face. Surprise, perhaps, or regret? Mrs. Hale, I've heard you're remarkable. From whom? The question emerged sharper than Ivy intended. Blackwell mentioned meeting you in Denver, said you were smart, capable, and clearly devoted to Rowan. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. High praise from Harrison Blackwell. The silence that followed was excruciating. Rowan hadn't moved, his hands clenched at his sides, his expression locked down tight. What do you want, Cole? The question was blunt, almost brutal. Cole flinched. Can we talk? Privately? Anything you have to say, you can say in front of my wife. The emphasis on the word wife wasn't lost on anyone. Cole's jaw tightened, but he nodded. All right, He took a breath. I made a terrible mistake, leaving the partnership, choosing Margaret over everything we'd built. I've regretted it every day since. And Margaret? Rowan's voice was ice. Does she regret it too? Pain flashed across Cole's face. Margaret left me 3 months after we married. Said Denver wasn't exciting enough, that I wasn't ambitious enough. Last I heard, she'd moved to San Francisco with a railroad magnate. Despite everything, Ivy felt a stab of sympathy. Whatever Cole had done, losing both his partner and his wife in pursuit of love was a harsh punishment. I'm sorry, Rowan said, and to Ivy's surprise, he sounded like he meant it. Are you? Bitterness crept into Cole's voice. Because I destroyed everything we built together for a woman who didn't even want me. And you, he gestured at the comfortable room, at Ivy. You found actual happiness, real partnership, everything I threw away. What do you want from me, Cole? Forgiveness? Permission to feel less guilty? Rowan moved to stand beside Ivy's chair, his hand finding her shoulder. I can't give you either of those things. I want my friend back. Cole's voice cracked. I want to undo the last 2 years. He stopped, shoulders sagging. I don't know what I want. I just know that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life, and I don't know how to live with it. The raw honesty in his words hung in the air. Ivy looked up at Rowan, saw the war playing out across his ruined face, anger and hurt, and the deep, aching love for a man who'd been like a brother. You chose her over me, Rowan said quietly. Not just once, but repeatedly. Every time she asked you to distance yourself, to spend less time at the mill, to stop defending me, you chose her. And I understood. I even forgave you for it, because that's what love does. But I won't pretend it didn't nearly destroy me. I know. Tears shone in Cole's eyes. I know what I did, and I know I have no right to ask for anything from you. But I'm asking anyway. Not for the partnership back. I know that's gone. Just for something. A chance to prove I'm not the man who made those choices anymore. Rowan's hand tightened on Ivy's shoulder, and she covered it with her own, offering silent support for whatever he decided. I need time, Rowan said finally. Time to think, to decide if I can trust you again. Because that's what you broke, Cole. Not just the partnership, but the trust. The belief that we were brothers in all the ways that mattered. I understand. Cole moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad you found her. Ivy. Someone who sees you clearly and loves you anyway. That's what I should have been, what I failed to be. I hope she knows how lucky she is. I'm the lucky one, Ivy said quietly. Your loss, Mr. Brennan, entirely your loss. Something like a smile crossed Cole's face, sad and genuine. I'm beginning to understand that, Mrs. Hale. After he left, Rowan stood frozen by the door, his breathing shallow and quick. Come here, Ivy said softly, rising from her chair. He came to her like a man in a daze, letting her pull him close, his forehead dropping to her shoulder. I thought I'd dealt with this, he said into her hair, thought I'd moved past it. But seeing him opened all the old wounds. Yes. His arms came around her almost desperately tight. I loved him, Ivy, like a brother, like family, and he chose someone who didn't even want him over me. I know. She stroked his back, feeling the tension coiled in every muscle. And that betrayal doesn't just disappear because time passed. Do you think I should forgive him? I think you should do whatever you need to do to be at peace. Ivy pulled back to look at him. If that's forgiveness, fine. If it's keeping him at a distance, that's fine too. You don't owe him anything, Rowan. But maybe I owe myself the chance to heal that wound properly, to have closure one way or another. Then take the time you need to figure out what that looks like. He kissed her then, deep and grateful, and Ivy tasted salt. Tears, though she wasn't sure if they were his or hers. The next few weeks were difficult. Cole didn't return to the homestead, but he took a room in Cripple Creek, and word of his presence spread through town like wildfire. Samuel Pritchard brought the gossip along with the weekly supplies. Folks are wondering if you'll take him back as a partner, Samuel said carefully, unloading crates. Some say you'd be a fool to trust him again. Others say a man deserves a second chance. And what do you think? Rowan asked. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. I think Cole Brennan made his choices, and he has to live with them. But I also think holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. So maybe the question isn't whether he deserves forgiveness, but whether you deserve the peace that comes with letting go. After Samuel left, Rowan stood on the porch for a long time, staring toward the mountains. He's right, Ivy said from the doorway, about the poison. I know. Rowan turned to face her. I'm going to town tomorrow, to talk to Cole properly. Will you come with me? Do you want me there? I need you there. He crossed to her, took her hands. You're my anchor, my reminder that I'm not that isolated, angry man anymore. I need you to help me stay grounded. Then I'll be there. The ride to Cripple Creek the next morning was tense. Rowan's jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the trail ahead. Ivy rode beside him in supportive silence, understanding that sometimes the best comfort was simply presence. They found Cole at the small boarding house on the edge of town. He answered their knock looking haggard, as if he hadn't been sleeping well. Rowan, Mrs. Hale. Surprise crossed his face. I didn't expect... Can we talk? Rowan interrupted. Really talk, not just... He gestured vaguely. Whatever that was at the house. Of course, come in. The room was sparse, a bed, a chair, a small desk. Cole offered Ivy the chair, then he and Rowan stood facing each other like boxers in a ring. I want the truth, Rowan said without preamble. All of it. Why you really chose her, why you let her convince you to push me out. Because it wasn't just about love, Cole. I know you. There was more to it. Cole's face crumpled. He sank onto the bed, buried his face in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red. I was jealous, he said hoarsely. Of you. What? Rowan's shock was palpable. You were always the strong one, the capable one. When the fire happened, when you got hurt, you still kept going. Built the operation bigger, stronger, and Cole's voice broke. I felt useless, like I was riding your coattails, taking credit for your success. That's not true. It felt true. Cole stood, pacing the small room. Margaret saw that insecurity. She fed it, nurtured it, told me I'd always be in your shadow unless I struck out on my own. And I believed her because I wanted to believe it, because it gave me an excuse to run instead of facing my own inadequacy. The confession hung in the air, raw and painful. You were never inadequate, Rowan said quietly. You were my partner, my equal, the only person I trusted completely. But I didn't trust myself. Cole's laugh was bitter. So I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too weak to believe I deserved it. Ivy watched Rowan's face shift through emotions. Anger, hurt, understanding, and finally, something like compassion. I wish you'd told me, Rowan said. Wish you'd talked to me instead of letting her poison your thoughts. I know I failed you in every possible way. Cole met Rowan's eyes. And I know I can never take it back. But I want you to know, leaving you, betraying your trust, it taught me exactly what I'd lost. And I've spent every day since trying to become someone worthy of a second chance. Have you? The question was a challenge. I went back to school, studied forestry management, business operations. I wanted to prove I could stand on my own, not just coast on your strength. Cole moved to the desk, pulled out a folder of documents. I've been working as a consultant, helping smaller operations improve their sustainability. Not for money, most of them can't pay much, but because I wanted to do something meaningful, something you'd respect. Rowan took the folder, flipped through certifications, letters of recommendation, before and after reports from small timber operations Cole had helped transform. His expression was carefully neutral, but Ivy saw surprise in his eyes. This is good work, Rowan said finally. It's all I have to offer, not a partnership, not your friendship. I know I destroyed any right to those, but evidence that I've changed, that I'm trying to be better. The silence stretched painful and taut. Ivy held her breath, watching Rowan war with himself. I can't go back to how things were, Rowan said finally. That man, the one who trusted completely, who believed people wouldn't betray him. He died in that fire along with Daniel. I can't resurrect him. I understand, but, Rowan continued, his voice strengthening, I can move forward. I can choose to believe people can change, can grow, can learn from their mistakes. Because if I don't believe that, then I'm just as trapped as I was before Ivy came into my life. Cole's eyes widened with desperate hope. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm willing to try. Not a partnership, not yet, maybe not ever, but friendship, carefully, with boundaries, with the understanding that trust is rebuilt slowly through consistent action over time. Yes, Cole's voice was choked. Yes, whatever terms you want, whatever you need. Then start by proving you mean it. Rowan handed back the folder. There's a small operation north of my land, family outfit, struggling with outdated methods. Help them. Do it well. Show me this change is real and lasting. I will. I swear I will. As they prepared to leave, Cole stopped them at the door. Mrs. Hale, he said quietly. Thank you. I didn't do anything. You loved him when no one else would. You gave him back his belief in people. That's not nothing. That's everything. His eyes shone with genuine gratitude. I failed him. You succeeded. I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful for that. Ivy felt Rowan's hand find hers, squeezed gently. Love him well, Cole continued. He deserves nothing less. I intend to, Ivy said firmly. The ride home was quiet, but a different kind of quiet than the journey there. Rowan seemed lighter somehow, as if setting down a burden he'd been carrying too long. How do you feel? Ivy asked as their homestead came into view. Uncertain, hopeful, terrified. He glanced at her. But also like maybe I can finally close that chapter properly. Like maybe forgiveness isn't weakness, it's courage. It's both, Ivy said. And you're one of the bravest men I know. That night, lying in bed with Rowan's arms around her, Ivy felt the shifting of something fundamental in their lives. They'd faced his past together, the grief, the betrayal, the complicated mess of human relationships, and come through it stronger. I love you, Rowan whispered into the darkness. More than I thought possible to love anyone. I love you too. Ivy turned in his arms, kissed him softly. And I'm proud of you, for choosing healing over anger. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. They made love slowly, tenderly, sealing their renewed commitment with touch and breath and whispered endearments. And when Ivy finally drifted to sleep, she dreamed of spring, of new growth pushing through hard soil, of buds breaking open into flower, of winter finally, irrevocably past. The weeks that followed brought subtle changes. Cole threw himself into helping the family operation north of Rowan's land with single-minded dedication. Every few days, Rowan would ride out to check on the progress, and he'd return with reports of genuine improvement. "He's working 16-hour days," Rowan said one evening, shaking his head in bemused respect. "Sleeping in their barn, eating whatever they offer. The old man told me Cole's the hardest worker he's ever seen." "He's trying to prove himself," Ivy observed. "He's succeeding." Rowan set down his coffee cup. "Part of me hates that. Hates that he can just work his way back into my good graces. But another part, the part you've helped me find, knows that holding on to resentment serves no purpose. So what will you do?" "I'll give him a real chance. Not a partnership, not yet. But maybe a consulting position. Let him prove over time that this change is permanent." Ivy crossed to him, wrapped her arms around him from behind. "You're a good man, Rowan Hale." "I'm a man trying to be good. There's a difference. Not to me." As spring deepened into early summer, the homestead transformed. The greenhouse Ivy had designed was built, a beautiful structure of wood and glass that caught the mountain light and held it like a promise. She spent hours there, coaxing vegetables and herbs from the rich soil, even managing a small section of flowers that bloomed in defiant color. Rowan would find her there in the evenings, dirt under her nails and satisfaction in her smile, and feel his heart swell with love so profound it was almost painful. "What are you thinking?" Ivy asked one such evening, catching his expression. "That I want to marry you again." She laughed, thinking he was joking. "We're already married." "I know." He stepped into the greenhouse, closed the distance between them. "But we married out of desperation and necessity. I want to marry you again. This time out of love, out of choice, out of the absolute certainty that you're the person I want to spend the rest of my life with." Ivy's breath caught. "Rowan, I want to stand before you and vow to love you, honor you, cherish you, all the things we glossed over in that first hasty ceremony. I want to do it right this time, to give you the wedding you deserve." Tears pricked Ivy's eyes. "I don't need a big ceremony. Neither do I. Just you, me, and the truth between us." He took her hands, his scarred face open and vulnerable. "Will you marry me again, Ivy Hale? Will you choose me again, knowing everything you know now?" "Yes." The word came out choked with emotion. "Yes, absolutely yes." He kissed her there among the growing things, in the greenhouse they'd built together, and Ivy tasted promise and hope and the sweet certainty of being truly, completely loved. That night, Rowan disappeared into his workshop, a small building behind the barn that Ivy rarely entered. She heard the sound of tools, the rasp of wood being shaped, but when she asked what he was working on, he just smiled mysteriously. "You'll see," was all he'd say. 3 days later, he emerged with a small wooden box, beautifully crafted from polished pine. "Open it," he said, handing it to her. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a ring. Not gold or silver, but carved from a single piece of mountain wood, dark, rich timber polished to a gleaming finish. Delicate leaves and vines wound around the band, so finely carved they looked almost real. "Rowan," Ivy breathed, "it's extraordinary." "I made it myself, from timber harvested on our land." His voice was soft, uncertain. "I wanted you to have something that represented what we've built together. Something made with my own hands, from the earth we call home." Ivy's vision blurred with tears. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I was going to make a metal band, but..." He gestured at his scarred hands. "I work better with wood. It's what I know. It's perfect." She slipped it onto her finger where it fit perfectly. "You're perfect. I'm really not. You are to me, and that's what matters." They planned the ceremony for the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, when light triumphed over darkness. Not a big affair, just the two of them and the people who mattered. Mrs. Chen, Samuel Pritchard, Catherine from Denver. And after much discussion, Cole. "Are you sure?" Ivy asked when Rowan suggested inviting him. "I'm sure." He's part of my past, and I'm learning to make peace with that. Plus, Rowan smiled slightly, I want him to see what real partnership looks like, what real love looks like. The day of the ceremony dawned clear and bright, the mountain sky a blue so intense it hurt to look at. Ivy woke alone. Rowan had spent the night in the barn maintaining the tradition that they shouldn't see each other before the vows. Mrs. Chen helped her dress in a simple gown they'd ordered from Denver, cream-colored silk with delicate embroidery at the bodice and hem. Nothing extravagant, but beautiful in its simplicity. You look happy, Mrs. Chen observed, pinning Ivy's hair. I am happy. Terrifyingly, wonderfully happy. Good. Mr. Rowan deserve happy too. You make him smile. Before you, he never smile. The ceremony took place in the orchard behind the house. Young trees Rowan had planted years ago, now bearing their first fragile blossoms. A simple arch of pine boughs marked the spot where they'd stand. Rowan waited there, dressed in a new suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. When he saw Ivy approaching, his expression transformed, wonder and love and gratitude all mixed together. There was no preacher this time. They'd written their own vows, decided to speak their promises directly to each other without intermediary. Ivy reached him, took his offered hands, and for a moment they just stood there, two people who'd found each other in desperation and chosen each other in love. I'll go first, Rowan said, his voice rough with emotion. Ivy Caldwell Hale, when you stepped off that stagecoach 6 months ago, I thought I was getting a housekeeper, a business arrangement, someone to make the emptiness of this place more bearable. Instead, I got you, stubborn, fierce, refusing to let me hide. You saw past the scar, past the rumors, past all the armor I'd built, and you loved me anyway. You taught me that I was worth loving, worth knowing, worth the risk of opening my heart again. So I vow to you, not just partnership, not just respect, but real, deep, consuming love. I vow to stand beside you in joy and sorrow, to celebrate your strengths and support your weaknesses, to never stop choosing you every single day for the rest of my life. Tears streamed down Ivy's face, but she was smiling. Rowan Hale, when I answered your advertisement, I was running away from a life I couldn't bear. I thought I was trading one prison for another, exchanging debt and shame for isolation and duty. But you gave me freedom. You taught me to shoot, to ride, to stand on my own feet. You respected my mind, valued my opinions, and never once tried to make me small or compliant. You showed me what real partnership looks like. Not one person dominating another, but two equals building something together. So I vow to you, not just love, though there's plenty of that, but true partnership, honest communication, the courage to keep pushing you toward growth even when it's hard. I vow to be your anchor and your wings, your comfort and your challenge. I choose you, Rowan Hale, today and every day after. Rowan slipped the wooden ring onto her finger, and she did the same with the metal band she'd commissioned in Denver, simple silver, engraved with coordinates marking the spot where they stood. I now pronounce us, Rowan said with a smile, exactly what we've always been, partners, lovers, friends, husband and wife. He kissed her as the small gathering applauded, and Ivy felt something settle deep in her soul. This was real. This was chosen. This was forever. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful. Mrs. Chen had prepared a feast, and they ate beneath the orchard trees as the long summer day stretched toward evening. Cole approached them quietly, his expression both happy and sad. Thank you for including me, he said. I didn't deserve the invitation. No, Rowan agreed, but I wanted you here anyway. Wanted you to see what we've built. Wanted you to understand what real love looks like. Cole nodded, his eyes bright. I'm happy for you, both of you, and I'm sorry for everything I failed to be, everything I failed to give you. I know. Rowan's hand found Ivy's, squeezed gently. And I forgive you. Not because you've earned it, but because I'm tired of carrying anger, because my wife taught me that forgiveness is freedom. She's remarkable. She is. Rowan pulled Ivy close, kissed her temple, and she's mine. As the sun set, painting the mountains in gold and crimson, the guests departed one by one. Samuel with a warm handshake and whispered congratulations. Catherine with fierce hugs and promises to paint their portrait, Mrs. Chen with approving nods and orders to enjoy their wedding night properly. Even Cole, with final thanks and quiet determination to prove himself worthy of the second chance he'd been given. Finally, Rowan and Ivy stood alone in the gathering twilight, the orchard around them fragrant with blossoms. "Happy?" Rowan asked. "Deliriously." Ivy turned in his arms, looped her hands around his neck. "You?" "More than I ever thought possible." He kissed her softly, tenderly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For saying yes twice. For choosing me when you had every reason to run. For teaching me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's loving despite it." "You taught me the same thing." Ivy pressed closer, feeling his heart beat strong and steady against her chest. "We saved each other, I think." "No." Rowan smiled, that full, genuine smile that still took her breath away. "We gave each other permission to save ourselves." They walked back to the house hand in hand, the future stretching before them bright with possibility. There would be challenges ahead. There always were. But they'd face them together, these two wounded souls who'd found healing in each other's arms. And that, Ivy thought as Rowan swept her into his arms and carried her over the threshold like a bride truly chosen, was more than enough. It was everything. The weeks following their second wedding blurred together in a haze of contentment and hard work. Summer established itself fully across the mountains, bringing long days of brilliant sunshine and warm nights filled with cricket song. Ivy's greenhouse flourished, producing vegetables that Mrs. Chen incorporated into increasingly elaborate meals. The timber operation ran smoothly under Rowan's careful management, and slowly, carefully, Cole began to prove himself worthy of the trust being extended to him. It was during one of these peaceful late summer evenings, while Ivy and Rowan sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of amber and rose, that the letter arrived. Samuel Pritchard brought it up personally rather than leaving it with the regular mail, his expression troubled. "This came express from Philadelphia," he said, handing the envelope to Ivy. "Looked urgent." Ivy's stomach clenched at the sight of her aunt's handwriting, heavier now, more forceful than the previous correspondence. She thanked Samuel and waited until he'd left before opening it with trembling fingers. The words hit like physical blows. Her aunt was dying. Cancer, the doctors said, aggressive and advanced. She had perhaps 3 months, maybe less. And she wanted to see Ivy one final time, wanted to make peace before the end. "No," Rowan said immediately when Ivy finished reading aloud. "It's manipulation, the same control tactics she's always used." "Maybe." Ivy stared at the letter, her emotions a tangled mess. "But what if it's true? What if she really is dying and I refuse to go, and then I have to live with that regret?" "She's caused you nothing but pain." "I know, but she also raised me when my parents died, fed me, clothed me, gave me a home. She may have been controlling and cruel, but she kept me alive." Ivy looked at Rowan, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I have to go. I have to see her, face her one final time, and either make peace or get the closure I need to move on completely." Rowan's jaw tightened, every protective instinct clearly screaming at him to refuse, but then his expression softened, resignation replacing resistance. "Then I'm coming with you." "Rowan, the timber operation can survive without me for a few weeks. Jack knows the business well enough to manage." He took her hands, his scarred face fierce with determination. "I won't let you face her alone. Not after everything she's put you through. It could be ugly. She'll say terrible things about you, about us. Let her." His voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "I've survived worse than the judgments of a dying woman. And you're my wife. Where you go, I go." The journey to Philadelphia took 10 long days of trains and uncomfortable sleeping cars. Ivy watched the landscape transform from wild mountain terrain to settled farmland to the crowded urban sprawl of the East Coast. Each mile closer to her aunt's house felt like moving backward through time, toward a version of herself she'd worked so hard to leave behind. Rowan stayed close, his presence a constant anchor. On the train, he held her hand when anxiety made her restless. In the hotels where they stopped, he wrapped her in his arms and whispered reassurances that she was strong enough to face this, that he believed in her, that nothing her aunt said could change the truth of who she'd become. Philadelphia hit Ivy like a wave of conflicting emotions. The familiar streets, the remembered landmarks, everything smaller and grayer than her memories suggested. They took a cab to her aunt's townhouse in Society Hill, and Ivy's hand shook as they climbed the steps to the front door. A nurse answered, a thin woman with kind eyes who introduced herself as Miss Patterson. "Mrs. Hale?" she asked, looking at Ivy. "Your aunt has been expecting you, though I must warn you she's very weak. The pain medication makes her confused sometimes." "I understand." Miss Patterson's gaze shifted to Rowan, and Ivy saw the familiar flicker, the quick assessment of his scar, the moment of shock carefully concealed. But the nurse recovered quickly, gesturing them inside. The house smelled of sickness and decay, despite obvious efforts to mask it with flowers and opened windows. Ivy's aunt lay in the front parlor, transformed into a makeshift bedroom. The woman who'd loomed so large in Ivy's memories had withered to almost nothing, skin stretched over bones, her once sharp eyes dulled by pain and medication. "Ivy," she rasped, her voice a shadow of its former commanding tone. "You came. You asked me to." Ivy moved closer, hyper-aware of Rowan standing just behind her, present but not imposing. "Aunt Margaret, this is my husband, Rowan Hale." Her aunt's gaze shifted to Rowan, and for a moment the old sharpness returned. "So you're the frontier brute who stole my niece." "I didn't steal her." Rowan's voice was level, calm. "She chose to come, and I'm grateful every day that she did." "Grateful." Margaret's laugh turned into a cough that racked her frail body. When she recovered, her eyes fixed on Ivy. "Look at you, dressed like a farmhand, sun-darkened, probably doing manual labor. This is what you chose over Philadelphia society." "Yes." Ivy kept her voice steady. "This is exactly what I chose." "Why? To punish me for trying to guide you toward a proper life?" The accusation hung in the air, and Ivy felt old patterns trying to reassert themselves. The urge to apologize, to explain, to make herself smaller to accommodate her aunt's anger. But Rowan's hand found the small of her back, a gentle reminder of who she was now. And Ivy drew strength from that touch. "You didn't guide me," she said quietly. "You controlled me. There's a difference. You used my father's debts and my gratitude to keep me trapped, dependent, afraid to make my own choices. I gave you a home. You gave me a cage." The words emerged with more force now. "You criticized everything I did, every choice I made. You made me feel worthless unless I met your impossible standards. And when I finally found the courage to leave, you tried to drag me back." Margaret's face contorted with anger and pain. "I was trying to protect you from making a terrible mistake. By telling me I'd thrown myself away on a brute? By demanding I return so you could make proper arrangements for my future?" Ivy shook her head. "That wasn't protection. That was control. You were always ungrateful. Even as a child, nothing I did was ever enough for you." The gaslighting was so familiar, so automatic, that Ivy almost fell for it. Almost started to doubt herself, to wonder if she'd been unfair, if she'd misremembered the years of subtle cruelty. Then Rowan spoke, his voice cutting through the manipulation with surgical precision. "Mrs. Caldwell, I've known Ivy for less than a year. And in that time, I've watched her bloom into one of the strongest, most capable women I've ever met. She manages a household, helps run a business, can shoot straight and ride hard and hold her own in any situation. Either she underwent a miraculous transformation the moment she left Philadelphia, or you consistently underestimated and undermined someone extraordinary." Margaret's gaze shifted to Rowan, genuine surprise flickering across her features. "You defend her." "I love her. There's a difference." "Love." The word was bitter in her mouth. "What do you know of love standing there with that ruined face? What could you possibly offer a woman like Ivy?" Ivy felt Rowan tense behind her, felt the old wound being prodded with cruel precision, but before she could defend him, he responded himself. "I offer her respect, partnership, the freedom to be fully herself without apology or diminishment. I offer her a life where she's valued for her mind and her strength, not just her compliance." His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Can you say you offered her the same?" The question hung in the air like a judgment. Margaret's mouth worked, but no words came. For perhaps the first time in her life, she had no cutting response, no manipulation ready to deploy. "I'm dying," she said finally, the words small and frightened. "I asked you here to make peace, and instead you attack me. No. Ivy moved closer to the bed, looked down at the aunt who'd shaped so much of her life. You asked me here hoping I'd feel guilty enough to stay, hoping you could control me one more time before you died. But I won't give you that satisfaction. Ivy, I forgive you. The words surprised even Ivy with their truth. For the control, the criticism, the years of making me feel small. I forgive you because holding on to anger serves no purpose except to poison my own happiness. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean staying in a relationship that hurts me. Tears leaked from Margaret's eyes, genuine emotion breaking through the defensive anger. I was so afraid. Of what? Of losing you like I lost your mother. Of watching you make choices that led to pain, of being alone. The confession emerged broken and raw. Your mother was my baby sister. When she died, when your father died, you were all I had left. And I held on too tight because I was terrified of being abandoned. The admission cracked something open in Ivy's chest, not forgiveness for the actions, but understanding of the fear that had motivated them. You weren't protecting me, Ivy said gently. You were protecting yourself. And in doing so, you hurt us both. I know. Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Ivy sat on the edge of the bed, took her aunt's withered hand. I forgive you, but I won't stay in Philadelphia. I won't give up the life I've built to make you feel less alone in your final weeks. I understand. Margaret's gaze shifted to Rowan again, something like respect in her eyes. You chose well, better than I gave you credit for. I know I did. They stayed in Philadelphia for 3 more days, visiting Margaret each afternoon while Ivy showed Rowan the city of her childhood. He met her with quiet curiosity, asking questions about her past, understanding the places and experiences that had shaped her. And Ivy found herself able to remember the good parts. Her father's bookshop, the library she'd loved, the rare moments of joy, without being consumed by the painful ones. On their final visit, Margaret was more lucid than she'd been since they'd arrived. I have something for you, she said, gesturing weakly to Miss Patterson. The nurse brought over a wooden box, ornately carved and clearly old. Your mother's jewelry, Margaret explained. I should have given it to you years ago, but I... She stopped, swallowed hard. I was punishing you for wanting to leave, keeping it from you as leverage. Ivy opened the box to find her mother's wedding ring, a pearl necklace, a few simple brooches. Nothing extravagant, but priceless for their history. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. There's also a bank account. Your father's debts. They were paid off years ago. The money I claimed was owed was actually your inheritance. I kept it from you to maintain control. Margaret's face crumpled with shame. The account details are with my lawyer. It's yours, all of it. The betrayal was so profound, so calculated, that Ivy couldn't speak for a moment. Rowan's hand found her shoulder, grounding her. I don't know what to say, Ivy managed finally. Say you'll use it well. Build something beautiful with that husband of yours. Live the life I was too afraid to let you live. Margaret reached out with trembling fingers, touched Ivy's cheek. Be happy, child. Be gloriously, defiantly happy. That's the only thing I ask. I will, Ivy promised. I am. Margaret's eyes closed, exhaustion claiming her. Go home. Back to your mountains and your strange, fierce life. Don't wait for me to die. I've already taken too much of your time. Aunt Margaret, please. The word was a plea. Let me have this final gift. The knowledge that you're living fully, not sitting vigil over my deathbed. Ivy kissed her aunt's forehead, tasting salt and sorrow. Goodbye. Goodbye, Ivy, and thank you for forgiving me even when I didn't deserve it. They left Philadelphia the next morning, the city fading behind them as the train carried them westward. Ivy pressed her face to the window, watching civilization thin and scatter, the landscape opening up into the wild spaces she'd come to love. How do you feel? Rowan asked, his arm around her shoulders. Lighter. Ivy turned to face him. Like I finally closed a chapter that's been dragging behind me for years. Like I can finally move forward without constantly looking back. No regrets about the money she kept? Some. but also understanding that I'm better for having built my life without it, for having chosen you out of necessity and then fallen in love without the safety net of wealth. She laced her fingers through his. Everything I have now I chose deliberately, including you. Especially me, I hope. Especially you. They traveled through the changing landscape, watching summer deepen toward autumn. In Kansas, they received word via telegram that Margaret had passed peacefully in her sleep 3 days after their departure. Ivy cried quietly in their hotel room, Rowan holding her while she mourned not what was, but what might have been if her aunt had been capable of real love instead of fearful control. "Do you need to go back?" Rowan asked. "For the funeral?" Ivy shook her head. "No, we said our goodbyes. That's enough." The money from her inheritance when transferred was substantial, enough to expand the timber operation significantly, or invest in new ventures, or simply bank against future uncertainty. Rowan left the decision entirely to Ivy. "It's your inheritance," he insisted, "your choice." After careful consideration, Ivy proposed a plan that surprised even herself. They would use half to establish a workers' benefit fund, providing assistance to timber workers injured on the job, supporting widows and orphans, ensuring no family would face the devastation that Daniel's family had endured. The other half would fund a school in Cripple Creek, providing education to children whose families couldn't afford private tutoring. "You want to give it away?" Rowan asked, not critical, but genuinely curious. "I want to make it mean something." Ivy's voice was firm. "My aunt hoarded money and control because she was afraid. I want to do the opposite, use it to help people, to create opportunities, to ensure her legacy is something good instead of just bitter." Rowan pulled her close, kissed her deeply. "You're remarkable." "I'm learning to be, with your help." They returned to the homestead in late September, the aspens turning gold and the air carrying the first sharp promise of winter. Mrs. Chen greeted them with unusual warmth, and even the horses seemed pleased to have them back. That evening, sitting on their porch and watching the familiar mountains turn purple with dusk, Ivy felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "I'm home," she said softly. "You are." Rowan's arm came around her shoulders. "And I'm grateful every single day that you chose to make this home." The Workers' Benefit Fund and school project consumed the fall and early winter. Cole proved invaluable in helping establish the administrative framework, his business training put to good use. The school opened in January, a simple but sturdy building that quickly filled with eager students. At the dedication ceremony, Ivy stood beside Rowan and watched children pour through the doors, children who would have opportunities she'd fought so hard to secure for herself. "Your aunt would be proud," Rowan said quietly. "I hope so." Ivy leaned into his warmth, but more importantly, I'm proud of what we've built together, of what we're becoming. That spring brought unexpected news. Martha, Daniel's widow, approached them after a community gathering to announce she was remarrying, a kind merchant who'd courted her patiently for 2 years. "I wanted you to know," she said to Rowan, her eyes clear and bright, "and to thank you again for everything you've done for Emily and me. The benefit fund, the support, it's meant the world." "Daniel deserved better than what happened," Rowan said, his voice rough with old grief. "He got 7 years of work he loved, doing something meaningful. That's more than many men get." Martha touched his arm gently. "Let yourself off the hook, Mr. Hale. Daniel would want you to be happy." After she left, Rowan was quiet for a long time. 7 years, he finally said. "I've been carrying guilt for 7 years, and she's been fine, moving on, building a new life." "People are resilient," Ivy said. "We survive the unsurvivable and find ways to keep living. You taught me that." "Did I?" "You survived a fire that could have killed you. You built an empire from nothing. You learned to live with a scar that made people afraid." She took his hands. "And then you learned to love again, despite every reason not to. That's resilience." "We learned together," Rowan corrected. "You taught me as much as I taught you." "Then we're even." His smile was full and genuine, the scar just another part of his face rather than its defining feature. "We're partners. That's better than even." As spring deepened, Ivy discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. The thought of bringing a child into the world, of becoming responsible for another life, felt overwhelming. "What if I'm like her?" she asked Rowan late one night, her hand on her still flat stomach. What if I become controlling and cruel because I'm afraid? You won't. His certainty was absolute. Because you know what that looks like. You've felt that pain, and you've chosen differently at every turn. But what if... Ivy. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You're the strongest, kindest, most fiercely loving person I've ever known. You'll be an extraordinary mother because you refuse to let fear dictate your choices. Because you've learned that real love means setting people free, not holding them captive. The words settled something in her chest, easing the anxiety. We're really doing this. We're really doing this. He kissed her softly. Together. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through summer. Ivy worked in her greenhouse until she could barely reach over her expanding belly, laughing at her own awkwardness. Rowan became comically overprotective, insisting she rest more, eat more, do less. I'm pregnant, not fragile, she protested, after he'd carried her up the stairs for the third time in a week. I know, but you're carrying the most precious thing in my world, and I intend to take excellent care of both of you. The baby arrived in early November during the first snowfall of the season. The labor was long and difficult, leaving both Ivy and Rowan exhausted. But when the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in Ivy's arms, nothing else mattered. A girl, the midwife announced, healthy and strong, just like her mother. Rowan stood beside the bed, tears streaming unashamedly down his scarred face as he looked at his daughter. She's perfect, he whispered. She is. Ivy guided his hand to the baby's tiny head. What should we name her? They discussed names for weeks, unable to settle on anything that felt right. But now, looking at the tiny face, Rowan spoke without hesitation. Hope. Her name is Hope. Ivy's eyes filled with tears. Perfect. Hope Hale entered the world with fierce determination, her cry strong and her grip surprisingly powerful when she wrapped tiny fingers around Rowan's thumb. And watching her husband hold their daughter with infinite gentleness, his scarred face soft with wonder, Ivy felt her heart expand in ways she'd never imagined possible. Cole visited when Hope was a week old, bringing a beautifully carved cradle as a gift. I made it myself, he said, almost shy. Wanted to give you something that mattered. It's extraordinary, Ivy said, running her hand over the smooth wood. Thank you. Cole looked at Rowan, holding Hope against his broad chest. You're going to be an amazing father. I'm going to try. Rowan's voice was thick with emotion. That's all I can promise. That's all any of us can do. Cole's expression held shadows of his own losses. Try, and love them, and hope it's enough. After he left, Rowan rocked Hope gently, humming a melody Ivy didn't recognize. What song is that? She asked. Something my mother used to sing. I'd forgotten it until now. He kissed Hope's downy head. Funny how becoming a parent brings back memories you didn't know you'd buried. As winter settled in fully, their lives found a new rhythm built around Hope's needs. Sleepless nights bled into exhausted days, but neither of them complained. The homestead that had once echoed with loneliness now rang with infant cries and lullabies and the particular chaos of new parenthood. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling softly outside and Hope sleeping peacefully in her cradle, Rowan pulled Ivy close by the fire. Do you ever regret it? He asked. Answering my advertisement? Leaving everything familiar for this wild, uncertain life? Ivy looked around the room, at the cradle holding their daughter, at the home they'd built together, at the man whose arms felt like the safest place in the world. Never, she said firmly. Not for a single moment. Even when it's hard? When Hope's screaming at 3 a.m. and we're both so tired we can barely stand? Especially then. She turned in his arms, looked up at his scarred, beloved face. Because even the hard parts are ours. We chose them, we built them, and that makes all the difference. He kissed her then, deep and slow, a reminder that despite exhaustion and responsibility and all the ways their lives had transformed, they were still Rowan and Ivy, still partners, still desperately, fiercely in love. The years that followed brought both joy and challenge. The timber operation continued to grow, providing employment and stability for dozens of families. The school flourished, producing educated young people who went on to build their own dreams. Cole eventually remarried, a quiet widow from Denver who loved him for exactly who he was, and rebuilt his friendship with Rowan into something strong and lasting. Hope grew into a fearless child who climbed trees and rode horses before she could properly walk. Her parents combined stubbornness and courage evident in every action. She bore a faint mark on her cheek, a birthmark that some might have worried over, but that Rowan kissed gently and called her beauty mark, teaching her early that differences made people interesting, not lesser. On Hope's 5th birthday, Ivy stood on the porch watching Rowan teach their daughter to shoot, his large hands guiding her small ones with infinite patience. "Not bad," he praised as Hope's shot pinged against the target. "Try again, and remember to breathe." Ivy's hand drifted to her stomach, where a second child grew. A boy, according to the midwife's predictions. Their family expanding, their love multiplying rather than dividing. Mrs. Chen appeared beside her, her own hair fully gray now, but her eyes still sharp. "Happy?" she asked in her accented English. "Deliriously," Ivy confirmed. "Good. You deserve happy. Mr. Rowan deserve happy." She patted Ivy's arm with rare affection. "You make good family." That night, after Hope had been tucked into bed with her favorite doll and a whispered story, Ivy and Rowan sat together under the stars. "Do you remember our first night?" Rowan asked. "When you arrived and I was so terrified you'd take one look at me and leave? I remember thinking you were the most intimidating person I'd ever met. And now? Now you're the person who makes me feel safest in the world." She laced her fingers through his. "Isn't it strange how fear transforms into love when you give it enough time and courage?" "Not strange. Miraculous." He pulled her close, his chin resting on her head. "You're my miracle, Ivy Hale. You and Hope and this life we've built. All of it. Miraculous." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd started as desperate strangers and become everything to each other. The frontier stretched around them, still harsh, still demanding, but also beautiful and full of possibility. Ivy thought about the woman she'd been when she'd stepped off that stagecoach so many years ago, frightened, desperate, convinced she was trading one prison for another. That woman couldn't have imagined this life, this love, this profound sense of belonging, but she'd had the courage to take the first step, to answer an advertisement from a stranger, to choose uncertainty over familiar misery, and that single act of courage had rewritten everything. "Thank you," Ivy whispered into the mountain darkness. "For what?" Rowan asked. "For seeing me, for loving me, for building this life with me." "Thank you for the same." His arms tightened around her. "For pushing me out of hiding, for refusing to let me live as a ghost, for teaching me that scars don't define us, our choices do." In the house behind them, Hope stirred in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. The sound made them both smile. "We should go in," Rowan said. "It's getting cold." "One more minute." Ivy wanted to hold on to this moment, this perfect, ordinary, miraculous moment where everything she'd ever wanted was exactly where she stood. "All right," Rowan agreed. "One more minute." They stayed under the stars, holding each other, two people who'd bargained with desperation and found love instead. The frontier had tested them, shaped them, forged them into something stronger than either could have been alone. And when they finally went inside, hand in hand, it wasn't an ending, but a continuation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments of both struggle and triumph. But they'd face it together, always together, just as they'd promised, beneath blooming orchard trees on the longest day of the year, when they'd chosen each other not out of necessity, but out of love. And that choice, renewed every single day in 1,000 small ways, made all the difference. It made everything.